Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our Basecamp Photo Club meeting. We have a very special guest tonight. We have Juan Pons, who is an expert wildlife photographer. Welcome, Juan. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
We are too. So our group started out primarily as landscape shooters, but as you probably know, and I think you do this yourself too, we cross over into other genres. So there's a lot of people in this group that cross over into the wildlife genre, and a lot of people who also do street photography and other urban things, underwater photography, astrophotography, all that kind of stuff. But when we've been going along here for a few months, our club is kind of new, and we've been doing mostly nature photography, but we have not had a wildlife photographer on yet. So we're very excited, and you guys are going to get some amazing tips from Juan. He was telling me that he has, I think, 100 slides for us tonight. So we're excited about that. For those of you guys who don't know Juan, his work has been featured in lots of magazines, including Sierra Magazine, Audubon Magazine, American Photo, Nature Conservancy. He's a recognized expert in wildlife photography and Lightroom, but you also do street photography as well, right?
Well, I mean, not too much of it. I do lead workshops in Cuba, which, does lend a little bit to the street photography. For me, it's more about, culture and architecture and just the entire, Cuban culture in itself. We end up doing quite a bit of street photography as well. But that's, my primary focus is wildlife photography.
Yeah, and you run a lot of workshops, right? I think you just got back from Yellowstone and you're getting ready to go to Cuba, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, we just got back from Yellowstone. I was there for 5 weeks, leading 3 workshops back to back. Next, a week from today, no, a week from later next week, heading out to Cuba for 3 weeks for 2 workshops. Then after that, we go to Costa Rica. Then after that, we go to Alaska, then Botswana, and then Madagascar. So it's pretty busy through the summer.
So fun. And that explains why when your assistant sent me photos, wildlife photos, there was whales that looked like from Alaska, and then like some giant lizard thing. I assumed it was like Madagascar or somewhere like that, and parrots and all kinds of cool stuff. So Yellowstone, obviously. So I'm really excited for what you have to share with us tonight. And I guess when you're ready, you can go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me, and thank you everybody for joining in. I have a lot of slides to go through, a lot of pictures in there as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to bring them up while we go through the presentation. The best way to do that is to actually type them into the chat. So then the Angel can actually read those out. We can address those as we go along during the presentation. I think we're going to have a Q&A session afterwards as well. So you can hold off your questions until then, or if you have a question about an image or something that I talked about through the presentation, feel free to bring those up again.
Yes, and I should have mentioned that. So thank you for saying that. I know there's a lot of new people on this meeting, so I should mention to you guys that we will do the presentation, we'll have a Q&A, and then everyone is welcome to stay for image reviews with Juan. So at the end, after the presentation, Juan will be going over member submitted images and giving reviews on that. So you guys are all welcome to stay for the whole thing. Usually our meetings are just under 2 hours. So that's basically the layout. Okay, thank you so much, Juan. You can go ahead.
Sounds good. So give me a second here. Let me get things going. And let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, yes, looks great.
Excellent. Okay. So, for those of you that I see a lot of familiar faces in here, and for those of you that have been on my presentations, you know that I always start, my presentations by encouraging people not just to take pictures, but actually make stunning images that tell a story. And there's a lot of work that goes behind creating images that are better than just a snapshot, and better just capturing a moment in time, but actually capturing a story in time and being able to tell that little bit of a story. So my presentation is going to go on talking about 20 different tips to help you create those stunning images that hopefully will tell a story. I always find that those images that tell a story tend to be much more interesting for the viewer. Okay, so my tip number one, and this is one of my cardinal rules, and is to always focus on the eyes when you're photographing your subject. No matter what the body position your subject is, you want to be able to have the viewer of your image connect with that subject by being able to see their eyes. And this is all about paying attention to the position of your subject, something that we're going to talk a little bit later, and the pose and the way that the subject is interacting with the viewer as well. That, as I mentioned before, eyes create that connection, allows us to much more connect and get more invested in the image that we're looking at. And here's a couple of examples of what I mean. This is a squirrel monkey in Costa Rica. Pretty nice image, beautiful. This is my favorite monkey that I've ever photographed. They're just stunning, and they're little. They're called squirrel monkeys because they're, just a little bit bigger than a squirrel. But you can see the difference between these two images. One where you were connecting with a viewer, we can see more of our subject, and we can have that kind of, almost emotional connection with a viewer. Here's another example of a harbor seal, newborn harbor seal. You can even still see the umbilical cord on this on this little seal. Pretty cute image, but being able to connect with your subject, being able to see those eyes and have that connection between the viewer and the subject makes a big difference, big improvement on the image. This is a spider monkey in Costa Rica as well, just like the other one. And sometimes the difference between having that connection can be very subtle. In this image, we can see the eyes of our subject, but we have that feeling that the subject is not really paying attention to us. It's looking over our right shoulder. But, if you work with your subject and you stick around for a little bit longer, you may get that connection by having that subject look straight into you, and you can kind of feel that connection that's happening here between this spider monkey and myself. I'm actually, again, in Costa Rica, climbing on a water tower because these guys don't really come down to the ground level. So, in order for me to be able to have that connection with my subject, I had to get on a water tower to actually be able to have kind of a eye-to-eye view on our subject. And that leads us into our second point, maintaining eye level with your subject. This is, again, one of my cardinal rules of photography, maintaining or connecting with your subject, being able to see the eyes, focusing on the eyes is number one. Maintaining eye level is close to number one, probably number two. I see this quite a bit. I do a lot of image critiques and image judging at different photo clubs, and I do see this happening quite a bit, especially with more beginner amateur photographers, that they're shooting down at their subjects. And when you shoot down at your subjects, you're minimizing your subjects. You're kind of making them, you're diminishing them in the subject, in the frame itself. So you want to make sure that you get down at eye level, and this is especially true for smaller animals, whether they be mammals, reptiles, or even waterfowl. I've been known to come home covered in duck poop because I was down on my belly on the shoreline photographing ducks that were in the water, to be able to have that nice, strong connection with my subjects. As I mentioned earlier, having that vantage point minimizes our subjects. Oftentimes like to even shoot a little bit below eye level because it elevates our subjects, makes them grander in the scene, and makes them more impressive. So think about that. Think about shooting at least at eye level, but maybe sometimes even a little below eye level. And by the way, this doesn't only apply to wildlife photography. This applies, in all kind of photography, especially when you're photographing children. You see that oftentimes adults photographing children standing, from a standing position, and you're looking down at your subjects, making them smaller. Get down on your knees, get down on the floor, sit down on the floor, and make those images that allows you to not just connect with your subject, but maintain eye level, put them at the same level as a viewer, or maybe elevate them a little bit more. Like I said, I get dirty all the time photographing subjects because I want to be able to make sure that I have that connection with my subject. Maintaining eye level is very, very important. Here's a couple of examples. This is a cow bison, a female bison in Yellowstone in the winter. Really nice frosty. This was actually pretty cold. I think this was about minus 10, minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's a pretty nice portrait of this bison. We have some tongue action, which is makes the image that much more interesting. If you will, gives you a little bit of color from the underside of the tongue. But you can tell that I'm looking down on my subject. I'm actually on a boardwalk photographing this bison that's actually pretty close to us. And it just doesn't seem to have that connection with my subject. But by getting down, I got down on my knees and was able to shoot from a lot lower position. I'm actually better able to connect with my subjects. And I got in a little bit closer. You can see all this frost on our subject. Still got that tongue moving, which is, makes the image that much more interesting, but making sure that you have that connection by staying at eye level with your subjects. Here's another one from Yellowstone as well. I've been doing trips to Yellowstone for a long time. I've been, this was my 19th winter in Yellowstone. So you'll probably see a lot of images of winter in Yellowstone throughout the presentation, because probably one of the places I've been to the most to photograph. And we oftentimes get lucky and see these river otters on the river. And this was really interesting. We had some really nice light, kind of modeled light that was hitting the face of this river otter, which was eating a big fish that I had just caught. So I had to make this image, but I still feel like I'm shooting down on my subject because I was on a big snowbank looking down at the water. I tried to get down as low as possible, but I still felt that I was looking down at my subject a little bit. And then you compare that image with this image, where not only do we have 3 otters versus 1 otter, but I am now shooting at eye level. So you can see where I'm elevating them to my same stature. I'm elevating them to the same height that I am, and allows me to have a much better connection with our subject. And not only that, but be able to see them a lot better, be able to see their entire shape, the entire body, their fur, all the different features that make an otter an otter. And again, this is increasingly important with smaller subject. This is a gladiator tree frog. This guy is about 1 inch long, and it's sitting on a martini mushroom, because these mushrooms, the mushroom head looks like a martini cup. And I wanted to get down low as possible to be able to have that, parity with my subject. And sometimes what that means, I'm kneeling down in mud, I'm getting covered in mud. My shoes are a mess. My pants are a mess, but I got the shot that I was looking at, and it allows me to connect much better with my subject. Again, this applies even to locust. This locust was photographed in the Galapagos Island. And again, I wanted to get down low and, kind of elevate my subject, not only do macro, which makes them bigger or larger than life, but, kind of elevate them to my same level, if you will. So sometimes even the smallest subjects, these guys are about 3-4 inches long, which are, bigger than the frog that we just saw, but still pretty small. But again, making that effort to get down as low as possible and get down at eye level. In this case, these guys have hundreds of eyes, but you kind of get the idea. Same thing with this mountain hare. This was photographed also in the winter in Yellowstone. These guys, even though they're pretty big, they're about a foot tall, still a lot shorter than I am. And as soon as I saw these guys are mostly nocturnal. So I was very, very lucky to be able to photograph this amazingly beautiful specimen out during the day on a day where the light was really nice and soft, yet it was nice and strong, which is my favorite kind of light, the strong diffuse light. So immediately as I saw this hair, and it was actually being very cooperative, I got down on my belly to be able to get that angle onto my subject, not just focusing on the eyes, but making sure that I'm shooting them at eye level. And you can see here that I'm even a little bit below eye level, which is one of my favorite ways to photograph wildlife subjects. Now, this is, probably my, one of my most important rules, probably number two, probably competes with number one. And that is taking an active role in our composition. With, wildlife, you cannot direct them to do something like you can in a studio with a model or an actress or a person. You can't, tell this, wolf or coyote or fox, I need you to move a little bit to the left or need a little bit to the right because there's something behind you. So guess what? We have to do this. We can't pose them. So we have to, move ourselves and take an active role in creating that composition. And what this means is that we need to pay attention to the relationship between our subject and its background, its foreground, and other subjects in the scene. And we then have to think about how our movement can rearrange the scene to our liking, or in a way that's more pleasant, or in a way that doesn't create collisions between the background or another subject and your main subject you're photographing. So we have to change our own perspective, change our position. Oftentimes I do see a lot of workshops, a lot of people out there photographing who kind of like plant their feet down. And you see this a lot, especially in landscape photography. They plant their feet down and shoot hundreds of images from the same position that they're in. I encourage you to move left, move right, up and down, get down on your belly, get up on the roof of your vehicle if needed to get a different perspective on your subject. By moving ourselves, we can rearrange that relationship between our subjects and the background and the foreground, make him cleaner, or be able to change the story that you're trying to tell. This is how we become active in creating our own images. Again, we can't ask our subjects to pose, but we can place them in the right spot by moving ourselves. Sometimes you can't, but we try to do that as much as possible. And I'm going to have a few images here of what that means. So in this particular scene, I had this this bull elk on along the Madison River in Yellowstone. And, when we first encountered, the position that we were in had those antlers colliding with that shoreline, kind of diminishing, the grandeur of these big antlers on this elk. So just by moving a little bit, to the left, I was able to then, in a sense, move my subject to place those antlers against the water and make him stand out a lot more than they would have if they were colliding with that shoreline that's kind of brown, same color as those antlers. It was just a simple movement of going from where I was, moving a little bit to the left, thinking what that how that perspective is going to change by just moving a little bit. Here's another example. This is a two-toed sloth in Costa Rica. And when we first encountered this sloth, it was high up in a tree. It was hard for us to photograph. So what I was able to do is very quickly jumped on the roof of the vehicle to get a much more eye-level perspective onto the sloth. Thankfully, these guys don't move very fast. So I was able to jump on the top of my roof very quickly and make this image while it was climbing on this branch on the tree. And to this day, this is probably one of my favorite sloth images that I've ever made because it's nice and clean and super simple. So here's another example of composing the image by being in the right angle. When I first encountered this group of bighorn sheep, we noticed that these two individuals were sort of very affectionate to each other. They must have been brothers or closely related because they just kept hanging out with each other and following each other as they were feeding on some of the grasses. So I very quickly moved from a position that I was on the right, position on the left, to have them more at a 90-degree, perpendicular to me, a 90-degree angle from me, so that I could get more of the subjects and be able to hopefully get these two interacting with each other, which I got lucky and they did. Doesn't always work, but again, being in the right spot at the right time, thinking about, how you can change your perspective, how you can pose your subjects by moving yourself, can make it such that when something cool happens, you're there ready to take the picture. Oops. These are king penguins in South Georgia, down near Antarctica. This was taken actually this past November. I was down there this past November, I think on my 6th or 7th trip down to that area. And again, these penguins are pretty tall. They're about almost 2 feet, over 2 feet tall, but still I'm much taller than they are. So what did I do? I actually got down on my knees and put my camera even lower than I was. I was able to flip out my viewfinder, my screen on the back of my camera, and actually was able to compose lower than I was, to be able to get an image that makes these guys bigger. At the same time, I moved kind of closer to the water so that I could, compose the other penguins coming into the background, to kind of give you a little bit of a story of how these penguins are moving towards us, towards the water, but also including the landscape that was in there, as opposed to shooting towards the water, which would not have been anywhere near as interesting. So again, we can't tell the penguins to move one side or the other. I have to move myself and kind of anticipate what they're going to do in order for me to get the shot that I want to get, that I want to create. Oops, I keep hitting the wrong key on my keyboard. Okay, so if you get only one thing out of this talk, out of this presentation, is that the one thing that's going to improve your wildlife photography more than any other thing is going to be to learn about the subjects you're photographing. Familiarize yourself with the wildlife you're trying to capture. Learn as much as you can about them. That's going to give you a number of different advantages to someone who doesn't know much about the photography, the subjects they're trying to photograph. Yes, you can always get lucky at a particular location, but knowing about your subjects can allow you to put yourself in the right spot at the right time, meaning that the habitats that your subjects like to dwell in, the food sources, the mating rituals, and all of these things can help you create better images by being in the right place at the right time and capturing the right behavior, if you will. So always study subjects, learn their habitats, their behavior, their breeding and mating cycles, very, very important. Learn what makes this species unique and try to capture that. That's going to make your images stand out from other images. Find out what makes these guys more interesting and unique and special, really. So think about the 3 basic universal needs your subjects have. That's food, water, and shelter. If you understand the types of food, where your subjects look for water and what type of shelters are looking for, your chances of photographing these subjects are going to increase dramatically. Not only are you going to be able to find them, but it's going to allow you to then create images that show them at their best. This is a red fox jumping. This is actually this behavior is called mousing. What these guys do is they're incredibly good at echolocation. They can actually not echolocation, but actually honing down on the subjects by listening to them. They have incredibly accurate hearing, and they can hear a vole down in 2 to 3 feet down in underneath the snow. Voles typically don't hibernate all winter. They kind of sleep for a while. They wake up for a while, and they dig these tunnels under the snow. And foxes, along with coyotes to a certain extent, but foxes are much better at this, can actually pinpoint by turning their heads. They can triangulate not only where a rodent may be under the snow, but even how deep that rodent is in the snow, so that they know how high to jump up, so that when they go down into the snow, they go just the right depth and also in the same location. So this behavior is called mousing. They sit around, they will listen for the sound underneath the snow. They'll sit for a minute and triangulate, trying to figure out exactly where it is. And then they jump up in the air, dive face first. And as you can see in this image, they go all the way down to their hind legs in search for that tasty morsel. And capturing this is incredibly difficult. There's a lot of luck involved, but it's also, like I like to say, luck favors the prepared. If you know what you're looking for, you know the behaviors you're looking for your subjects, you can be ready to make an image like this. One of the reasons this is difficult is because you oftentimes, the conditions need to be right. There needs to be enough deep snow, the rodents need to be in the area, and the fox needs to be hunting in that particular moment. But by paying attention to all those clues, understanding the environment that the fox is in can make you maybe hang out a little longer as you see this fox, hoping that it's going to start exhibiting this behavior. And one of the reasons why this is so difficult to capture, not just to see, but to actually capture, is because you think about it, the only way you can make an image like this that works well is when that fox is jumping exactly perpendicular to you. So that means, at 90 degrees or 270 on the other side. Think about all the other angles that it could jump in. And I will tell you, most of the time, they will jump away from you or towards you or to the side, or not perfectly perpendicular to you. So it's actually a really difficult image to make because there's an element of luck, but you also have to understand the environment and the behavior that you're looking for. This is a long-tailed weasel. People call him ermine. And it's oftentimes the weasels are short tail and long tail weasels. When they turn white in the winter, people call them ermine. Otherwise, they may call them stoats or long tail weasels. I always call them long tail weasels or short tail weasels because that's what they are. And as you can imagine, these guys, pure white animals with a tiny bit of a black tail on white snow, they're incredibly difficult, not just to photograph, but to even see. So you have to know what to look for. You have to know what behavior to look for, and you need to know the habitats to look for them in. It's the only way you're going to make images like this. Yeah, sometimes you may get lucky, and you may see one crossing the road in front of your vehicle, but I will guarantee you will very quickly lose them because, again, they're white against white, but not only that, sometimes they just bury down into the snow and completely disappear. They're like little Houdinis. It's just incredible. And out of the 19 winters that I've been to Yellowstone, I've only been able to photograph these guys probably half a dozen times in a way that was, was successful. I've seen them many more times than that, but very difficult to photograph. But again, knowing where to look, knowing the habitats that they're in is going to help you. It's going to increase the odds that you're going to be able to capture images like this one. These are scarlet macaws in Costa Rica. And again, understanding the mating, nesting, breeding behaviors of subjects are going to allow you to find, or make images such as this. The scarlet macaws nest in cavities in trees, usually pretty big cavities, because they're big birds and you need to be able to fit in there, not just the breeding pair, but the chicks that are growing up. And birds, when, birds, as opposed to mammals, let's say, when they fledge, they are at full size. You never see a baby animal out in the wild, a baby bird out in the wild flying around. By the time the birds fledge, they're full size. So you think about, these guys may have 4 chicks and they're pretty big. So they need really big cavities in order to fit, the entire family in there. So again, knowing their nesting behaviors, their breeding behaviors allows you to find locations such as this, where we saw this big hole up in the tree during nesting season. And, we just hang out for a little while, hoping that we would see one of these guys coming back in to either feed their mate if they're sitting on eggs, or feed the chicks. We didn't see the chicks, we just saw the 2. So we think that these guys the eggs had not hatched just yet. This is a Bohemian waxwing. Again, understanding the favorite food sources of these animals are going to help you try to figure out where to photograph them in the environment. Understanding that they like the berries of the cedar trees is going to allow you to then, when you see the animals in the area, you know where to go to photograph them, because you know where they're going to be. You can almost predict where they're going to go, so you can photograph them. Understanding their favorite food, their food sources, is important. Where to be to photograph coastal brown bears in Alaska. We go out to Alaska, to the Katmai National Park, the Katmai region, to photograph bears feeding on the salmon run. Again, you need to understand not just the time of year that this happens, but the time of year, different locations, different creeks, for example, that the salmon are running in. There are a bunch of different species of salmon. Some run earlier than others. Some bears prefer one type of salmon over another. And in some creeks, they will have salmon that run up those creeks at different times of year. You could have some creeks where you have the salmon running in July. In some other creeks, they may be running in September. So depending on where you are, you got to understand not just, which species of salmon these bears are going after, but you need to understand the rivers that species are going up and what time of year. So you can be there at the right time to make images like this one. And then sometimes understanding unusual and neat behaviors allows you to create kind of, subtle but very unique images. This is a pronghorn in Yellowstone, again in the winter. Pronghorns, believe it or not, they're a North American species, and they are the fastest land animals in the world over distance. A cheetah is faster, but a cheetah can only run for a short period of time, for like a sprint. These guys can run about 55 miles an hour for a quarter mile to half a mile. Just incredibly breathtaking to see these guys running at full speed. And while I have a policy of no butt shots, this one is an exception. And that's because, pronghorns have this very unique behavior that when they are getting ready to run, that flight instinct kicks in, the hairs on their butt stand up. And then they create this cool heart shape. So I've been trying to get this particular image. I've been trying to make this image for quite some time, of a male with nice horns, overlooking, doing the over the shoulder look while it's getting ready to take off. So you can see that that really cool behavior of the pronghorns. Again, understanding your subjects, studying them, knowing their behavior, knowing their preferences for locations is going to help you create images that are more compelling than just a regular image.
Juan, we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yes.
I'd ask you. So Jane wanted to know how you made the fox image. And I think she is referring to having the many different positions of the fox in the image.
Yeah, so that was shot at fast frame rate. So I was shooting, I think in that case, about 15 frames a second. So, when a situation like that happens, you just have to hold that shutter down and just capture as many frames as you can. I certainly capture more frames that you see there because I was shooting at 15 frames a second. And then I selected the frames that I liked the most and then brought them all in, the frames that I wanted to shoot or wanted to compose together, brought them into Photoshop and, kind of stitched them together, if you will. Certainly it helps that I have a nice pristine background with nice clean snow, makes it a lot easier to kind of place those together or compose those together in one image. If you have vegetation in the background, that becomes a little bit more difficult. But what you end up doing is you end up shooting, as opposed to zooming in on your subject, you shoot a lot wider so that you can capture the entire motion of that fox jumping across. And then you're able to just basically take the images of, select out the foxes and place them into the scene, if you will, or line up all the images so all the vegetation is lined up perfectly. That doesn't work all that well because if there's a little bit of wind, then you'll get some blurring. So usually you're better off just copying, having one image that has, for example, the starting image, and then putting, copying and pasting the different foxes into the scene where they were when they jumped. Hope that helps.
Thank you. And then one other question that came up, it says, when it comes to birds or small mammals, would you place food out for them to attract them?
So for birds, you can certainly do that. Birds don't get attached or completely rely on one food source. But for mammals, you shouldn't do that. Basically, birds are the exception. Basically, all other animals, you do not want to be putting food out because they become dependent on that food source. And oftentimes that can become a dangerous situation. I've known people that have gotten bit by foxes or coyotes that they thought were really friendly because they kept feeding them. But the day that you don't feed them and that animal's expecting that food, they may turn on you and bite you. So I've known people have been bitten because, they did that. Plus, it's not, as a general policy, it's not a good thing to habituate the animals to getting fed by hand. Let them go out their food, photograph them in the wild as you should be photographing them. Birds, on the other hand, certainly you can put feeders out for them to come and feed and put branches around the feeder so that they kind of land on those branches that are coming in to feed. That's certainly acceptable because, again, birds will not rely on any one food source. They will actually forage in addition to coming to a bird feeder.
Thank you.
Okay. So capturing the environment, oftentimes I see photographers zooming in, exercising that zoom on their lens to the maximum to create portraits and create close-ups. And portraits and close-ups are fine. They're great. They're beautiful. But I think capturing subjects in their environment creates a more interesting image because it helps you tell a little bit of a story about your subject. They provide a sense of place and transports you to that location, brings you closer to the subject you're trying to photograph. And again, it allows you to tell a better story. So yes, take that portrait shot, take that close-up, but then also think about expanding a little bit, including a lot of the background, which will tell you a lot more about your subject. This is a marine iguana in the Galapagos. And this is one of the images that I envisioned making when I first went to the Galapagos. I wanted to kind of give that sense of, a volcanic island with these prehistoric looking animals. And I wanted to capture this very unique behavior that marine iguanas exhibit, which is, if you look closely at this image, you'll see all this water that they're sneezing out. So marine iguanas feed, the only marine iguanas in the world, they feed under the water in the ocean, and they eat a lot of algae and seaweed. But because of that, they tend to ingest a lot of salt. So they need to get rid of the salt. And this is how they get rid of the salt. They actually sneeze it out through special organs near their nose. It looks like they're sneezing. And, you just have to be ready for this because it happens, without any notice at all. But, again, trying to capture the environment, trying to show you that mountain in the background that looks like a volcano that's about to go off, make this looks really primordial. This is a snowy owl, photographing them in Canada. And one of the things I wanted to photograph, wanted to show was the environment that where we find these snowy owls in. They tend to like these open farms, these open fields, these farms that are kind of, laying dormant during the winter because there's lots and lots of rodents in the area. So I wanted to photograph, this snowy owl. And just getting a picture of snowy owl is beautiful, but being able to show the environment that I find them, I thought was a lot more interesting. So I worked very hard for many years to try to get an image like this one, and I was lucky enough to be able to capture it again, including that sort of silo and barn in the background with a split rail fence in the foreground. I think kind of tells you a lot more about the subject, the habitats that it it lives in, by including all those elements in it. Okay, I'm being told that I need to move a little quicker because we are, kind of really far back on the slides I need to be in. So I'm going to try to move a little quicker. Again, showing a little bit of the environment. Actually, I made this image just last month in Yellowstone. Very, very dark, very high ISOs. I think this is ISO 12,800. I'm going to talk about that a little later. But trying to include not just the profile of the bison and the nice color in the sky, but kind of setting the mood for them. I could have zoomed in on that bison, but I liked including it more along the thermals and being able to see some of the vegetation that's there. Bald eagle in Alaska. These guys are like pigeons in Alaska, the places where I lead workshops in there. We just photograph tons and tons and tons of these guys out there. Just amazing, amazing creatures. And again, I like to show them in the environment in the background. So when I'm photographing these guys, it's a little harder to do. I try to photograph them when they're lower in the sky so I can include those snow-capped mountains in the background and give you a better sense of place. Tip number 6 is to maintain separation. Very, very important to do this, to be able to show your subjects more fully and really simplify the images and give you a better sense of the subjects that you're looking at. Gives you a better chance to appreciate your subjects. And it also provides a better sense of depth and dimension, plus a better shape to your subjects themselves. And here's a comparison of some flamingos that I photographed in the Dominican Republic. Nice enough image, 3, odds are always a good number, 3 flamingos going across, but you can see that the 2 on the right, they're overlapping a little bit. So providing a little sense of tension and conflict in the image itself. If you just wait a second or 2, you may be able to get them a little bit separated, showing you the animals, individually, one against each other, providing the separation, giving you a better, more peaceful image that it doesn't provide that tension that the previous image displayed. But it's not just providing separation between the subjects, between the subjects themselves, but providing separation between the subjects and the background. You can see that I moved in this particular image to my left in order to prevent the back part of this flower from coming up behind the head of my red-eyed tree frog. So just by moving a little bit, I was able to maintain or create that separation between my main subject and the background. These are chinstraps penguins in Antarctica on Half Moon Island in Antarctica. An image that I worked a couple of years to try to make. I would see these penguins coming up this little hill with this amazing backdrop. And it was difficult because I wanted to get a few penguins coming up at the same time, but these guys oftentimes walk closely to each other. So I was always having a lot of separation or a lot of collisions between my subjects. So it took quite a bit in order to get the shot that I wanted with separation between all of my subjects and having the right f-stop in order to blur out that background enough to create separation between my subjects and the background, but still give you a nice hint of what the background was all about. This is actually a bighorn sheep in Yellowstone again in the winter. And this, trying to maintain the separation between my subject and, the background. In this case, when we first encountered this bighorn sheep, it was standing in such a way that that tree on the right, that green cedar that's on the right, was actually behind our subject. And while that still made a pretty nice image because that cedar was out of focus, by moving a little bit, to my right, I was able to then create that separation between my subject and that tree in the background, and really make him stand out, give you a better sense of dimension, compared to an image where that bighorn sheep was against the green. In this image, a bighorn sheep really pops out of the image. It's almost like it's jumping out at you. Number 7, capture action and or motion. This is something that we always try to do. Being able to capture an animal performing, some fantastic action. Action provides an intent and captures our imagination, makes us trying to come up with a story, makes us trying to think or guess what our subject is trying to do. And by doing that, the viewers creating a little story in their heads behind that image. And again, action provides insight into our subject's behavior because it kind of tells you a little bit of story of what they're about to do or what they are all about. Here's more coastal brown bears in Alaska. This is an old boar coming in trying to catch the salmon. And I love this image because you can see all this action, all this water splashing everywhere. You can see the fish in the water. The only thing you don't see is, the eyes of that fish. It's scared for its life trying to swim away from this bear. But you can see the claws, and you can just imagine what happened next in this image by capturing that action and capturing that splash of water, capturing the motion of our subject. Same thing with this bobcat coming in the snow, all frosty from -20. I think this was actually -20 or -30 degrees. We were photographing this bobcat on the prowl, looking for some birds to catch from the river that's just out of the frame here. Again, seeing how that paw is up in the air, seeing the snow as it's flying off the paw, as it's moving, gives you that sense of motion and gives you a sense of action to our subjects, and makes them much more interesting than just a cat that's sitting on a on a mound of snow, for example. This is a hippo in Botswana, again trying to capture the menacing look of these hippos. These guys are one of the most dangerous animals in all of Africa, more dangerous than lions, more dangerous than anything else. They kill more people than anything else because they're very, very, very territorial, and they're very strong jaws, and those teeth are just incredible. They're just very large, and they can puncture through a man's torso in no time at all. Being able to capture that little bit of action, the water dripping from the bottom of the lip, kind of adds to that sense of motion in there. Puffins in Newfoundland. Again, having all the puffins laying, sitting down on a rock, they're kind of neat and they're beautiful birds, but being able to capture that one coming in for landing while it's raining just adds kind of a, brings that image up a notch and gives you more sense of action, a place, a behavior that these animals are exhibiting. This is a chestnut mandible toucan in Costa Rica. And one of the neat behaviors about these guys that I always try to capture, not just getting a toucan on a branch, which is nice, what I call a bird on a stick. They can be really nice images, but being able to capture a little bit of action, tell you a little bit about the behavior of these animals. Toucans, they pick the fruit. They're eating this fruit on the left side of the tree, the cecropia tree. They pick things off with the tip of their beaks, but they have a tiny little thin tongue. They can't use the tongue to move food from the tip of the beaks into their mouth. So they actually have to toss whatever fruits that they're eating into the air and then catch it in their mouth. And that's one of the things I'm trying to capture here, to try to get that sense of motion and that behavior that we can show. So it's not all about the animals running through the scene, creating a splash or throwing dirt up in the air. Oftentimes it's a matter of getting a bird as it's eating or pulling, some fruit off from the tree to eat as well. That can constitute as action that can tell you a little bit about more about your subject and tell you a little bit of a story about what you're looking at. Northern gannets in northeastern Canada. These guys, this is a colony of about 40,000 pairs of gannets. And it's amazing to me, because these all look the same to us, that they can find each other. The two pairs, the pair of gannets can find, you know, the one that's going out to sea on hunting, trying to catch fish, knows how to find its mate down on the ground amongst this sea of other gannets. And being able to capture that motion of them coming in, but not just them coming in to land, but having them make that connection eye to eye between the two gannets, looking at each other, can again allows you to come up with a little bit of a story of what may be going on here. Another very important rule is to always allow space for your subjects to move into. You know, this can create a much more dynamic image. It can provide a sense of place and motion for your subject as well. So you always want to provide more room in front of your subject than behind the subject. As this bullet point illustrates, it can create a better flow of the image for your eyes to follow. And typically what I mean by front is the location where your subject is looking into, or where it seems to be heading to or walking towards. And here's a couple of examples. Another bobcat out in the winter. And this image is cropped, where you can see there's actually more or less equidistant space between the front and the back of our subject. But a better crop would be one like this, where you provide a little bit more room in the foreground, in front of your subject for them to move into. This image, to me, seems to have a lot more motion and seems much more dynamic than the previous image. Another example here, this is another coastal brown bear coming in for some king salmon. And you know, this crop, again, equidistant on both the front and the back of our subject. But I think that one where you're providing a little bit more breathing room, a little bit more space for the subject to go into, kind of predicting where it's going to go, it's going to provide an image that flows better, that looks better, that's more pleasant to the eye. Sometimes the difference can be very small. Doesn't have to be all that big, but just providing a little bit more room in the foreground. Here's another one of a young bull elk in Yellowstone. Again, providing a little bit of room. We can see that this elk is moving to the right. We can see that by the way it's lifting its foot, kind of taking a step forward. So we know it's going to the right. So we want to provide a little bit more room to our right. Muskox in northern Alaska. This is during the spring, when the muskox are bringing their young ones, their calves, down off of the mountains. And again, providing, you know, capturing the motion is great, capturing the action is amazing, but providing a little bit more room on the foreground, or in front of your subject, I should say, is going to allow for a much better, much more pleasant image that flows a lot better than one where you have them right along the edge of the frame. You know, photography is all about the light, and the same thing in wildlife photography. You know, we're not in a studio, so we cannot control the light as well as we can in a studio, but we always want to pay close attention to the quality and direction of the light. You know, most importantly is the direction of the light. The quality of the light is also important, because if you have, you know, light in the middle of the day that's above you, that's not going to be all that pleasant, unless you shoot during the winter where you have snow on the ground that can act as a reflector. Then in that kind of situation, even midday sun can actually be very pleasant, because that reflector, that snow acts as a reflector, bringing light into the shadows of your subject. So always pay attention to the quality of light and the direction of the light. A lot of wildlife does not tolerate light or external flash very, very well. I should say a flash or external light very well. So oftentimes we have to work with what we have. So it's even more important for us to pay attention to that direction of light, so we can position ourselves to take advantage of that light. And what that means is that we want the light to be right directly behind us, so the sun directly behind us, or maybe up to 45 degrees to the right. Sometimes it can pay to shoot straight into the light source as well, especially if you're trying to create a silhouette on your subjects. But typically, in order to see your subjects well, you want to pay attention to the light, the way that it's coming, so that you have it more behind you or a little bit to your right or a little bit to your left. And you always want to be planning ahead to maximize the light potential that you have, whether it's the direction of the light or the quality of the light. Another flamingo, this time in the Galapagos Island. You can see this light. The sun was really low, really nice golden light on this amazingly flat mirror-like pond. And this flamingo, I was able to isolate it amongst the other flamingos that were here to just capture this reflection on the water and the ripples and the light as it's hitting your subject. So paying attention to the light, can pay dividends. This light is coming a little bit from my, to my left, but mainly behind me. So that's why you can hardly see any shadows, but yet you can see a lot of texture and dimension to the subject. But sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, shooting into the light can be very successful. This is a bison in Yellowstone, again, silhouetted against this amazing sky that we had. We got very, very fortunate to find this bison on a ridge as it was walking up the ridge. So paying attention to the light and position yourself in such a way to take most advantage of the light. This is Bosque del Apache in New Mexico. This situation occurs very, very seldomly. In the many years that I've been to Bosque, I used to run workshops there quite often. I've only encountered this situation maybe 2 or 3 times. Early in the morning, has to be a really cold morning where the water, was warm during the day, got cold at night, and all this fog started lifting off of the water. And then the sun down low created this amazing golden light with these silhouetted sandhill cranes in the lifting off of the water. We saw an image similar to this. Again, when we're photographing the eagles, we're paying attention to the light. We're shooting with the light behind us so that when we photograph the eagles, the underside of the wings are completely lit and we can see every feather detail on these guys, not just on the head, but under those wings as well. All those primary feathers or the secondary feathers. It's amazing when you have the light in the right angle, all the definition that you can get on the subjects you're photographing. Same thing here, paying attention to the quality of light. This was in Yellowstone in the fall, as the sun was setting to our right, about to go behind a mountain. We got lucky enough to position ourselves with this incredible looking cottonwood tree and a bison coming in the foreground. Again, paying attention to that light, seeing where that light is going to go and kind of planning and taking a chance that things will line up for you and be able to photograph or create a great image. Okay, number 10, know your equipment. I'm just checking our time here, make sure that we are, we're kind of really running kind of long, but we'll keep going on, maybe speed up a little bit more. And knowing your equipment is incredibly important. Understanding your equipment's strengths and weaknesses is very, very crucial in order to make the best images that you can. Familiarize yourself with what settings to use in each situation. Work it out ahead of time if possible so that you're ready to photograph to make that image. Because what happens is with wildlife, you oftentimes have, 1 or 2 shots to getting that image. Sometimes wildlife cooperates, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you just get the 1 shot with the image, with your subject. And if you don't have your equipment set up right, you're going to miss that shot. And I like to know how to operate my equipment without looking at it. If you have to take that camera off of your eye off the viewfinder to dial the settings on the camera, you may lose the shot. So you want to know how to operate your camera, blindfolded if possible. Again, just as I mentioned, sometimes you just don't have time to figure out things in the moment. You want to work them out ahead of time. Understanding your equipment, one of the most important things is understanding, the strength and weaknesses. The cameras nowadays are so incredible. Especially the high ISO performance is just unreal. This image was taken at ISO 12,800. An image I would not have been able to make before because we're under the canopy of the rainforest in Costa Rica. And this three-toed sloth, this young three-toed sloth, kind of made an appearance in front of us. You know, it was just like a mere 6 feet away from us that we were to photograph. It was so dark that I had to push my ISO to its limits on my camera, the furthest I'm willing to do. But I'm still able to make an image. I like to say I'd rather get a grainy image than no image at all. And you know, today with some of the advances that we have with digital photography, namely some of the noise reduction programs that are out there, like Topaz Denoise, you can make incredibly good images, even at incredibly high ISOs. So understanding, you know, how you can perform at just those really high ISOs can be very important. I have clients many times that say, well, I don't shoot anything above 800 or 400 ISO. I'm like, well, you're not going to be getting a lot of shots under the canopy in the rainforest of Costa Rica, because even if when it's full daylight out, it can be extremely dark. Understanding, for example, how long can you hold your lens handheld, you know, with long shutter speeds. I deliberately had a long shutter speed here of about half a second in order to get that snow kind of streaming the way you see it. And I knew that my subject, as it was moving, was going to be blurry. But I know that if I'm steady enough with the image stabilization of my lens, and if I shoot a bunch of frames, I may get one or two where my fox is acceptably sharp and I'm still getting the look that I want. So understanding how to do that with your equipment is extremely important. You know, being able to utilize the autofocus on your cameras to maximum potential. It's incredible. These guys, Scarlet Macaws, fly incredibly fast. So you need to understand the best settings to capture these guys in flight if you plan on making images such as this. So understanding your equipment, understanding your camera, how well it works, how you can push it, what limits you can push it to are going to allow you to make images that may be a little bit unique. Here, kind of the same technique with this pied kingfisher in Botswana, as you saw with the red fox earlier. Always, tip number 11, always remember the fundamental rules of composition. And these are not to follow them strictly, but it helps you create more aesthetically pleasant images. So remember the fundamental rules. It could be the rule of thirds, leading lines, framing, and many, many more. I'm not going to list them all. Hopefully you guys know most of these already. And part of knowing the rules, you need to learn when to apply them and when it's okay to break them as well. We don't want to just break them or apply them, you know, mindlessly. We want to know when we're applying them and when we're kind of decide to break them. In this particular scene, you know, this bull elk that's growing its antlers in the spring, I put it dead center in the frame because it's such an impressive animal, especially that amazing texture on the velvet on those antlers makes it such that it can stand to be placed right in the middle of the frame, because our eyes are drawn not just on the body of our subject, but into the antlers as well. You can see how I placed it in the middle of the frame, yet I still try to follow a little bit of the rule of thirds by putting what I call the center of gravity of my subject, in this case, the eyes, on that bottom line of the rule of thirds. Another brown bear in Alaska, trying to, again, put that center of gravity of my subject, the part that feels more natural to be in that rule of thirds. To me, it's very important. The rule of thirds is a rule that I follow constantly. I have that on my viewfinder so I can always see, you know, the rule of thirds as I'm photographing it. Framing is another incredibly important tool that we can use to compose images. This frosty bison in Yellowstone, I positioned myself, I had to run in order to be able to frame it against this snow-covered tree, because, you know, as it was moving, it was getting into an open area that, you know, would not have as impact or would not have as much interest as this one where it's framed with the pine tree around it. And these leading lines of this green kingfisher can draw your eye to the subject, to the part of the image you want your viewer to see. It can be very, very effective tool. Number 12, respect your wildlife subjects. You know, as I can't stress this enough, as wildlife photographers, we must be advocates for our subjects. We must protect them. We must respect them, and we must, you know, encourage others to do the same. There, you know, I have a saying is that no picture is worth endangering your subjects. So, you know, just enjoy them, understand the gift that they're giving you by allowing you to photograph and allow you to get close in certain situations, but don't get too close. You know, when you start seeing your animal's behavior change, it means that you're getting too close to them and you're having a negative impact on them. You know, sometimes you think, oh, I'm just, you know, it's just me that's impacting it. This is not going to severely negatively affect my subject. But it's not just you. It's the next photographer that goes and photographs that subject, and the next one after that. And if enough of people do that, you can actually imperil and put your subjects in harm's way. So be a good example of what a wildlife photographer should be. Respect your subjects, learn about them, and you know, don't get too close. Let them do their thing, and trust me, you can still make great images, even when you're, you know, following all the rules, like this bison procession in Yellowstone doing a heavy snowstorm. Or, you know, when we photograph in Costa Rica, one of the things that we do, we love to photograph critters like the frog that I showed earlier, or this eyelash pit viper, you know, but we don't take groups out into the rainforest at night, because if you do take a group of people in the rainforest at night, you will probably end up stepping on more subjects than you will ever be able to photograph. So we have experts that go out the night before, collect subjects for us at night, and bring them to us for us to photograph in the morning. Now, as soon as we're done with our subjects, we release them back to where they were captured, where they were found. Or if we notice that there's any sign of stress on them, we stop what we're doing with that particular subject and we let them rest and put them away. But we feel that that is going to be the best way and safest way to keep our subjects nice and safe. And it's our way of saying thanks to them for allowing us to photograph them. There's kind of a story behind this fox. Suffice it to say that some people, after I made this image, some people were feeding this fox and it started to get aggressive. And unfortunately, the national park had to put it down, had to destroy this animal because it was getting too habituated and it was becoming a hazard to some of the visitors. So again, there is no excuse for not respecting the wildlife, and that's what, you know, sometimes happens. If you don't respect the wildlife, you don't do what's right for them, they may end up having to be destroyed because they become a nuisance and a danger to people. You know, think about using the correct depth of field. You know, one of the biggest misconceptions of wildlife photography is that you must use a small aperture. And I will tell you that the vast majority of the images that you've seen were shot with a wide open aperture. And that's because, you know, depth of field grows with distance. When you're shooting with a long lens, you are shooting further away, so your depth of field is greater. So you don't have to have that small aperture to get that deep depth of field. You know, there are 4 factors that affect depth of field. One is focal length, one is distance to your subject, and the other one is aperture. The 4th one is, you know, format size. Basically, if you're shooting a crop sensor or a full frame sensor, it really doesn't affect depth of field, but it, you know, essentially does in the way that we see it. So learn about the 4 factors that affect depth of field and how you can use them to your advantage. You know, I like to use wide apertures because it gives me these incredibly smooth out of focus areas. In this situation, I need to have enough depth of field. This is a scintillated or scintillion, sorry, hummingbird in Costa Rica. These guys are tiny. They're less than 2 inches big. But I needed to have enough depth of field to get all of my subject in focus, or at least, you know, the beak and the gorge and the eyes and a lot of the feathers. So obviously the tail I was not able to get in focus. So I needed to have a deep enough depth of field to have as much detail as I could in my subject, but still blur out that background. In a situation like this, you want to have a deep depth of field in Bosque del Apache, early morning sunrise as the birds are starting to wake up and starting to fly. You want that deep depth of field with a wide angle lens, so you have as much detail as possible on all the birds that are in the foreground as well as in the background. Again, shallow depth of field, enough depth of field to get my entire subject in focus, but having that background nice and creamy out of focus that makes my subject stand out. So understanding your aperture is going to be very important in creating images that focus your viewer's eye on the part of the subject, on the part of the image, on your subject, namely, that you want them to focus on. So another thing to pay attention to is capture, pose, and which also in my book creates intent. Capturing the right pose with your subject, and this kind of goes hand in hand with capturing action. It can help tell the story within a specific frame. Pay attention to subtle changes in your subjects that can show you different coloring or different traits of your subject that may be more or less interesting. And again, separation from the background is very essential in order to bring out those features of your subject that you can. But with wildlife, patience is key. You've got to have patience. If you're not patient, don't go into wildlife photography. You have to be patient with your subjects. You have to be willing to sit there and wait for them to do, something interesting for you to photograph. A fox sitting on the ground can be pretty, but it's not as interesting as a fox moving through the snow with snow blowing against it as it's flying. Blowing against its face. But again, it helps to understand your subjects in order for you to predict what they're going to do and what's going to happen next. This is a really interesting, one of the few nocturnal seagulls in the world in the Galapagos Island. Beautiful, beautiful creatures. For some reason, I got lucky with this guy that was kind of doing his thing during the day, trying to capture that pose, that little bit of action, I should say, as well as including my foreground in there to complement my subject. Sometimes the pose can just be something funny but interesting. This is a squirrel monkey in Costa Rica. Another image that can show you kind of a little bit of a pose or intent or even action, as that lion in Botswana is yawning. Or kind of showing you a little, tender moment between a mother capuchin monkey and its little baby. Again, capturing that pose of the monkey holding onto its mother, looking back at us while the mother is busy feeding. Looking for that specific pose can make what could be a good image a great image. Utilize your autofocus. Understand your autofocus system is incredibly important, especially with modern cameras. The modern cameras have remarkable autofocus systems, but you have to learn how they work. But let the camera help you figure that out. Let the camera help you get the focus on the subjects. Learn the strengths and weaknesses of your camera's autofocus systems. They all have weaknesses. There's not a perfect autofocus system, no matter how good they are nowadays. So you need to understand, when to override the autofocus that your camera is doing and when you can take advantage of it. And for wildlife photography, for me, back button focus is essential. Learn to use back button focus. I guarantee you your photography and your focusing will become that much better when you learn how to use it correctly. And then also select the correct focus points for the situation. Do you want a single point? Do you want 9 points? So the points be in the middle or the left or the right? Be deliberate about how you're using the autofocus system. If you do, you're going to get more amazing images. I'm going to give you 2 quick videos here of how good these autofocus systems are. And this is where the autofocus systems are taxed to the maximum. This is a snowy owl coming in for a flight. And you can see that with this camera, I'm shooting with a Sony A1, shoots 30 frames a second, 50 megapixel, 30 frames a second. With an autofocus system that is just unreal how it's able to capture about 60 frames in this sequence every single one of them in focus as this snowy owl is flying towards me. And if you've ever done some birds in flight, you know that is one of the hardest tasks for any autofocus system to do. You can see that out of all of these frames, every single one of them, the owl is absolutely tack sharp. And here's another sequence of eagles in Alaska coming in to grab fish out of the water. And understanding and using your autofocus system correctly allows you to create images like this, every single one of them in focus. It's just unreal. We live in some incredible times with cameras. Now, the other thing to think about is encourage yourself to think creatively. You know, it's great to get the normal shot, but the wildlife images don't need to be literal. You can actually, you know, become kind of a fine art photographer, use creative techniques to create better wildlife images. You know, this could be long exposures, or it could be adding negative space, you know, shooting wider into the scene and shooting up close to your subject can create a very unique situation. This is Bosque La Pacha again, cranes on one of the pools with about a 2-second exposure to try to get some movement onto my birds. So they don't just look static. They look like they're moving, that they're having, you know, that they're feeding in the water. They're just settling in for the night. Getting in nice and close and creating an abstract. Again, trying to create something a little bit different than your typical, you know, wildlife shot. You know, be creative by creating silhouettes. I love shooting silhouettes of animals, especially when you have pretty interesting backgrounds to them. Or even shooting like this red-eyed tree frog through a leaf and trying to get its silhouette as it's climbing through a leaf. Investing in proper gear, I think it's extremely important as well. You know, take the time to invest in the right lens, in the right kit, the right camera, and very important also the right outdoor gear. You know, do your research, ask fellow photographers that you trust. You know, unfortunately, I think that there is a lot of misinformation on the internet. A lot of people create review videos on YouTube or whatnot without working with the equipment very long. So make sure that you follow photographers that you trust and ask them and look at what they're recommending. Don't just look at, you know, any kind of person that's trying to give you a recommendation online. And don't get hung up on outdated ways of thinking. I showed you an image earlier about that sloth that I shoot at 12,800 ISO, something that I would have never done before. So don't get stuck on those, you know, outdated ways of thinking. Think of, you know, reevaluate what you're doing. Constantly try to think about, is there a better way to do what I'm doing than the way I'm doing it right now? And do prepare yourself for all situations that you can encounter yourself in. You know, I like to use, I'm done shooting with long 500mm lenses, you know, prime lenses, because they're so big and heavy and widely. I'm using shorter, smaller lenses. This is a 200 to 600 lens from Sony that I can handhold. I don't need to use a big tripod on it, and gives me the flexibility of zooming in or out. Incredible performance. You know, incredibly sharp images are no longer exclusively the realm of prime lenses. You can do incredible stuff with some of the super zoom lenses that we're seeing out there nowadays. You know, and then just make sure that you have the right gear for the right situation. That's Jacqueline and I on the left. Jacqueline is here on the call as well. She's my assistant. We're in Katmai photographing the coastal brown bears, where it's raining a lot of the time you're there. And on the right is just having the right gear to stay nice and warm in Yellowstone, even in minus 44 degrees, which is the coldest we saw this year when we were out there. And that's 44 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. The two scales meet at minus 40. I mentioned earlier being patient and being prepared, incredibly important. If you're not patient, you know, don't get into wildlife photography, because you cannot force your subjects to cooperate. They're going to do what they're going to do. You just have to be prepared to sit and observe and be ready to photograph them. By knowing their habitat, knowing their behavior and the needs of your subjects, you can, you know, increase your chances or you know, make it so that you can make the better images that you're hoping to get. And it's all about patience, patience, and patience, being able to sit and wait for your subjects. This is a bobcat on a deer kill that we photographed just this past January in Yellowstone. Again, understanding where these guys are, understanding the behavior, talking to other people, and having the right gear. This was very, very cold morning. We got out there even before the sun was up to be able to photograph this guy in minus 20-degree weather. If we weren't prepared with the right gear, we would have been miserable. We wouldn't have lasted long enough to be able to photograph this guy. Being patient to wait for the right moment to create a good image with separation and action and grace. Patience is all important to that. Same thing with this image, being able to wait for your subject to pose in the right direction to be able to silhouette against the sky. It's all about patience. Sometimes it's just a pelican, but sometimes it's a pelican with an amazing sunset. Or, being being persistent, persevere in your photography, persevere with the images that you're making. Oftentimes, I'm shooting thousands of images of some of these subjects, especially wildlife, just to get the right pose. I will end up deleting 99% of those images, but just that one image where the subject is looking back at me as it's flying makes it all worth it. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Always advocate for your subjects. Be respectful. I mean, I'm repeating this again because I think it's so important. Be considerate of your subject's natural habitat. Don't destroy a habitat they're in. Don't go trampling in through the habitat and make it, less of a habitat for your subjects. Just like I mentioned earlier, when we go to Costa Rica, I don't take groups into the rainforest at night because we'll end up, a lot of these frogs live on the leaf litter, and if we're just 8 of us walking through the rainforest, we're going to squish a lot of those. So we don't like to do that. Remember, we are guests in their environment, so be respectful and protect them. And the last item that I want to leave you with is not to forget to be in the moment and appreciate the experience. Sometimes what you want to do is stand up, put that camera down, look around you, and appreciate where you are. Appreciate that you're not at the office, that you're not at work, that you are in this amazing environment. Be thankful for what you're getting from your subjects. I personally find experiences to be more important than the photography itself. Photography is great, but without experiencing a photo to me is kind of empty. A photo helps me remember and relive the experience of when I was there. So always remember to take a breather and look around you and be grateful for the opportunity to photograph. And these are a few images from some of my workshops in the environments that people are in, photographing, making amazing images in the landscapes, and hopefully appreciating where they are. And apologies for running a little late. This took a little longer than I thought it would, but I wanted to give you guys a little, as much information as I could. And if you enjoyed that and you'd like to join me at some future date on a workshop, make sure to check out my website. We have a number of openings even for this year. People are looking to go somewhere else the rest of this year. And we have some openings for next year, and we'll have more openings coming up in the next probably a couple of weeks. Well, that's it that I have for the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing here. So Angel, you can take over now.
Juan, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm pretty positive that if we weren't on Zoom, we would be having a standing ovation and everyone would be clapping. So if you guys want to post your appreciation for Juan in his presentation in the chat, we'd love to see that. But I personally am completely obsessed with that image of the snowy owl flying with the barn in the background. I mean, that's just like right place, right time, probably amazing amounts of patience. and it really paid off. It's
A
incredible.
lot of it is perseverance, just being there over and over and over again. A lot of folks, get the image and they think, oh, I'm done. I got the image. I'm never done. I'm always going back, shooting the same thing over and over again. Like I said, I've done winter in Yellowstone for 19 years. People ask me, are you bored of photographing bison in Yellowstone? And, Jacqueline, can attest that I still get excited when I see bison. They're beautiful. They're amazing. They're just cool to photograph. I don't get tired of them.
Well, just like with landscape photography, you can go back to the same place over and over and over again. And nature is always going to give you something different.
That's right.
You're going to see
Absolutely.
something new. So this was incredible. I mean, I can't even so many great images and great tips. So thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
if you guys, we'll do a very quick question answer, and then we can move on to image reviews. So I know everyone will be excited to hear what Juan has to say about their images. So I see a lot of appreciation in the chat. Wonderful presentation. Someone needs some Sony autofocus tips. Oh, okay. Beautiful and amazing, great presentation and good information. Excellent, excellent.
Great. Good to hear.
Yeah, everybody really, really enjoyed this.
By
So
the
yeah,
way, your rule number 20 might be the most important thing on your entire list.
I would agree with that.
It's
I always
real
try to
easy
take
to
the
get
time to
wrapped
enjoy
up.
where I am. So
I was an underwater guy for 20 years, and one of my biggest regrets is I don't remember most of those dives, but I got some great freaking photographs. Whereas instead of concentrating so much on my plan and the study and everything you talked about to get the good image, I never just put the camera away for a day and dove. I always had a camera with me. I'm never going to dive again with a camera, actually, which is pretty funny. So,
well, you can ask me every image that you see, all of my images, and people ask me this: how do you remember where that was? What the situation was? I can tell you everything about every image that I shot, that you saw there, where I was when I shot it, what the situation was, all of that. And the only reason I remember that is because, like I said before, the image helps recall the experience, and the experience is something you remember. Pressing the shutter, you don't remember, but you do remember the experience. You remember the moment, you remember the location, you remember, all of that. So just absorbing it, taking a breather, looking around, I think it's incredibly important.
yeah, and when we have a story that goes along with our images, and we can communicate that as well to people who are looking for images, like, if they want to hang them on their wall, when they connect with that story, it makes it even more of a powerful experience for them to have our art in their homes. So that it's good to be able to, and just for people to enjoy it as well. If you tell the story online, it's so much more than, just people seeing images that they're just going to scroll through. So
Right.
it's great to be able to communicate that. So do you guys have any questions? You guys want to, you can raise your digital hand, or you can just unmute yourself, pop it in the chat. If not, I will move ahead to the image reviews. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get ready to screen share. If you guys think of something, you can put it there. So for those of you guys who are new with us tonight, every month we have 2 meetings. We have a different presenter each time. And at every meeting, we have the opportunity for members to submit images for review. When people submit images for review, the presenter goes over the image. I will announce the title. They'll give their comments, and then they will either give it an award of merit or not. So if an image is aesthetically pleasing, if it's something that has skills that are well executed, just, pleasing composition, good exposure, things like that, the presenter can give it an award of merit. If it receives an award of merit, it will move ahead into our year-end photo competition. If it doesn't receive an award of merit, that's okay. All of this image review is meant to strengthen you as an artist. So hear the feedback, take a step back from the image, say, does this work for me in my image, and maybe make some adjustments. Or you might take a step back from your image and say, you know, I like it. It serves me the way that it is, and I think I'm going to proceed with it like that. Either way, you're strengthened as an artist from the experience. So with that being said, I will go ahead and pull up our slides for tonight. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. I had this all pulled up. I had to restart my computer right before the meeting. Just take 1 second. I also loved the images that you had, Juan, of the tiny frogs. They were amazing. Whenever I go to the zoo, those are always
a
my
lot of people
favorite.
don't care for the reptiles and amphibians, but I love reptiles and amphibians. So, you know, just as much as I like the big mammals.
I love the frogs. I'm not a huge fan of snakes, but even the snake you had was beautiful. Like I was looking at the snake. I thought I was going to have to look away, but it didn't even scare me because it was just beautiful.
Yeah,
which is
that
kind of
snake
unusual for me. What's that?
That snake is just gorgeous. That in person too. Is it the golden morph eyelash pit viper one?
Yeah, yep, yeah, and that one's unique because it had a lot of
So
red
unique.
red color on them, which is not usual at all.
Aren't pit
Very
vipers
cool.
poisonous?
Mhm.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they're poisonous. Yeah.
We have to stay a certain distance away, and we don't handle them. Obviously, the professional handles it.
Yeah, you wouldn't catch me in there in the dark.
No.
Me neither.
Well, that's the other reason why we don't take people in the dark at night in the middle of the rainforest.
I don't want to run into that guy in the daytime.
Yeah.
Me neither.
Okay. So this is our theme category. So obviously tonight our theme will be wildlife. And this is our first image. This is called Best Side.
I did say that, you know, I have my rule is no buttshot, but this one's interesting. I love the patterns of the zebra on the on this image. You know, it's kind of funny because it's centered, but I think in this image it particularly works well because you have all these concentric circles going around with the zebra patterns that makes your eye go around and around. If you notice that, your eye doesn't kind of stop in any one place. Your eye just keeps wandering and looking around. So it's very unique and nicely done. Okay,
So
you can go
is
to the
that-
next one.
Next one.
Yep.
And this one is called Snow Bath.
Yeah, this looks like a snow leopard cub. And you know, again, you know, nicely done. I love the little bit of snow that we see. I don't particularly care for the pose that this subject is. It's kind of a cute pose, but if you notice at the face, you know, the animal kind of looks like it's in pain, or it doesn't have a nice, pleasant look to it. Again, it's kind of a cute pose. It's on its back, probably rolling around. But perhaps maybe looking at another image around this image where, you know, it doesn't look like it's grimacing. Maybe the eye is looking more at the camera and have a better connection with the subject. Next.
So he's looking kind of serious there. Oh, hang on. I don't know why this went to the end. Sorry.
Yeah, I love
Okay,
this image.
This
I
one
think
is
that-
called. This one's called Flossing.
Okay. No, this amazing image. I love the expression. I love the hairdo. I love the action that's going on. The fact is, you see how this chimp is looking straight at us. We're making that sort of connection with the subject. You know, obviously, you know, we're closely related to chimps, so it's even stronger connection between us. But you can see how that connection, that eye to eye is that powerful. And the fact that we're also at eye level, just a beautiful, beautiful image. I love the background, that there's some texture to the background, but it's out of focus enough to really focus our attention on our main subject. Yeah, this one gets a merit for sure.
Nice. Okay, so that's a merit for Myrna Combionica. And this one is called Baby Bear Portrait.
A beautiful, beautiful baby bear. And it's amazing. You can see how sharp this image is. The focus is spot on, right on the eyes. We can see those eyes. I mean, all the we can actually. I want to put my hand through this fur on this cub. It's actually, very well done, very well executed. The one thing that I would do to the image is one thing that I do with a lot of especially mammals, but some birds also, mammals have brows. Most mammals have brows. It's just some as raptors. So what that brow does, it actually casts a shadow on the eyes and makes the eyes darker. So I try to bring in a little bit more light into the eyes. I used to do that with a fill flash, many years ago, but now with Lightroom and Photoshop, I'm able to just go in, select the eyes and just bring a little bit of light in there by moving sometimes the shadow slider, or maybe sometimes the exposure slider a tiny little bit, not too much, just a little bit to bring those eyes more into focus and make that stronger connection between the viewer and the subject. And I love the way this image flows from right to left. You can see how our eyes kind of keep moving around the image. So yeah, this one also gets a merit.
Awesome. So that's a merit for Laura Dooley. And this one is called Nesting Time.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a while for the image to show up. Here we go. Okay. A beautiful great blue heron, or GBH, as we call it, in nesting or breeding plumage, I should say. I love the fact that the wind is blowing, and lifting all that breeding plumage. The colors are just spectacular. I love the action that's taking place here with it sort of building up on that nest. The only nit that I have about the image is that see how we're looking up at it. And I understand, I mean, it's a great blue heron. They build their nest up high on trees, on rookeries. And oftentimes that's the only thing you can get. And for all things considered, this is not too steep of an angle. But, I think that this setting specifically, oftentimes a lot of these settings are really busy. This setting is really nice and clean with a beautiful background. I would have gone the extra mile and done whatever I needed to get a higher vantage point, to shoot this more eye level, because I think the setting is that spectacular. I give this one a merit as well.
Awesome. So that is a merit for Terry Brayman. And this one is called Gone Fishing.
Still waiting for it to show up. Oh, here we go. It's another GBH, or great blue heron. But this is an image where, this could have, there's a lot of going on here. There's our main subject, which I'm assuming is a great blue heron, is very small in the frame. So it's hard to figure out what is it about this image that I, as a viewer, need to be paying attention to. And this is another example where actually getting down lower would have helped this image a lot, because you would have been able to get down lower, zoom in some, and still get a lot of that environment in there. Because when you get down lower, one of the things that it does, it compresses the span of that water. We'll bring that heron up in the frame a little bit, and we'll compress the distance of the water from the bottom of the frame to the top of the frame, allowing you to zoom in and still capture those nice rocks and vegetation that's in the background. I will also move maybe a little bit to the left, as we talked about earlier, so that that rock that's right behind our subject wouldn't interfere with our subject. So unfortunately, I think there's so much going on here that I would encourage the photographer to zoom in, distill the image as to what's more important, and simplify. You know, one of the things you may have noticed from the presentation, my presentation, is that all my images are very, very simple. I work hard to work at trying to make the images as simple as possible, so that there is no question what the viewer is supposed to be focusing on. And unfortunately, this image, there's so much going on, my eye keeps wandering and not latching onto any one part of the image. Okay, next one.
Okay. Next. Oh my gosh, I don't know why I keep doing this.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so this one is called Eagle Eyes.
So one of the challenges looking at this image is that we are so cropped in and zoomed in that it's pretty pixelated. And I don't know, perhaps they were trying to crop out something that was in the background that's distracting. I don't know, but it's, you know, the pixelation makes it really hard to kind of see detail on the image. And that's one of the things, that texture and the detail is one of the things that attracts us most to an image. Obviously, the subject and the pose and all that is very important, but being able to see detail it's very important. I'd like to see more of my subject as well. You know, yeah, we know it's a bald eagle, but you know, I'd like to see more of my subject. I think that getting in so close, cropping in that much, just makes it too much in your face and makes it, you know, kind of tense. You know, when I look at this image, I feel tense. And I typically, unless it's something newsworthy, I don't want to feel tense when I'm looking at an image, right? You know, I want to feel, you know, I want to have warm, fuzzy feelings. I want to feel like it's a pleasant image to look at. This one, it just feels like it's a little bit too much in my face and a little too, you know, tense. Okay, next one.
Okay, this one is called Band of Brothers Cheetah.
Great shot, great interaction with the ones in the background. This one in the foreground really being super sharp. I would have left a little bit more room on the left-hand side. Obviously, this image was cropped. I don't know where it was cropped. Maybe it was cropped on the right. But I would have a little bit more space on the left to allow room for that tail, because that tail is just too close to that edge, or the left edge, for comfort. And I would leave a little bit more room on the right for my subject to look into. Our subject is looking to the right. Yes, it's looking kind of a 45-degree angle from us, but I still looking more to the right. And to me, that right edge also feels a little bit too uncomfortable. So I'd like to have a little bit more room, just a tiny bit on the left-hand side. And I would say, you know, maybe half as much space as we have between the cheetah and the edge. You know, would have half as much space to give yourself a little bit more room, and maybe perhaps crop down from the top a little bit. We don't need all that negative space on the top. It's not adding much to the scene. You know, I would try to focus more on my subjects themselves. So I would crop in from the top and expand on both sides. Okay, next.
Okay, and this one is called Flying White Monkey.
I love the action on this one with a monkey flying coming into the left side of the
Too much going on.
of the image, but unfortunately we have the one on the right being cropped, and it's just cropped a little bit. So one of the things I always encourage people to do is, before you press the shutter, is to run your eye along the edge of the frame and do what people call border patrol, to make sure you're not cutting anything off that you mean to include, or you're not including anything you meant to cut off. And unfortunately, in this case, this image, this monkey on the right is being cut off. But I think that there is an image here within this image, and maybe perhaps crop in closer on the flying monkey with the tree on the left-hand side and focus in more on that, and remove the distraction of the monkey and the tree on the right-hand side. Because I think that's where the action is at, is that the flying monkey itself, not the monkey that's on the right. Okay, next one.
This one is called Gray Crowned Crane.
And these guys are amazing, amazingly beautiful. The patterns and the colors and the texture are incredible. However, you know, and I love the background. I love the autofocus and the grasses in the foreground. But I think that you may have cropped it in the wrong place at the bottom. It just feels like I want to see the feet. I'm missing the legs that are there. When you're cropping a subject, you either want to crop it deliberately or not crop it at all. And here it feels like you crop right as where the legs come out of your subject. You know, maybe crop out a little bit further up or include the grasses in the bottom. Even if you can't see the legs, the bottom of the legs, the feet, doesn't matter. You want to provide space for your subject to sit in. And right now, you know, this subject looks like it feels a little uneasy the way it sits against the bottom of the frame. I think it's a great image, but, you know, being able to see more of our subject or maybe crop it more deliberate may help the image a little bit. Also pay attention to the angle. Remember, we talked about pose during the presentation. This animal is looking slightly away from us. Most of the time, when a subject starts moving away from you or start looking away from you, is the time you stop pressing the shutter. You want them to be coming towards you or looking towards you, even if it's over your shoulders, even if it's a 45-degree angle. But when it goes past that 45-degree angle, unless it's silhouette or, you know, profile shot, those images are not as attractive. And in this particular case, it's looking kind of back and down. So it, you know, having a little bit more assertiveness, if you will, in your subject by having them looking towards you would make the image that much stronger. Okay, next one.
Okay, this one is called I Think I See Dinner.
This is looks like a turkey vulture. Pretty interesting shot. And again, these guys, just like the herons, tend to hang up high. They do come down to the ground when they're feeding on some carrion. But again, you know, looking up at our subject is not necessarily the most attractive look. It's better in some cases than looking down at your subject. And, you know, I like the angle of the light. We can see a lot of detail in here. But, you know, it just looks like we're looking at the underside of your subject, which is not an attractive look. The other thing I would pay attention to is look at those feathers, those primary feathers, the tip of that wing. There's a little bit of motion blur in there. You know, if the bird was flying, having that motion blur on the tip of the wings would look actually really nice and natural in my book. But the fact that this animal is on a perch, even with its wings stretched out, maybe sunning itself, you want those wings to be perfectly sharp. You don't want them to be out of focus. So, or you don't want them to have some motion blur on it. So make sure you check your shutter speed and get those wings nice and sharp. Next one, please.
Okay, this one is called Playtime.
Oh, such a cute scene. I love the interaction between these two and the location that they're in. I'm trying to think, you know, the image, the subjects look kind of centered in the frame, but I think it kind of works. You know, they're both looking a little bit to the left and down, and we're looking kind of almost down at our subjects. I would have gotten a little bit lower to get a better eye level shot to your subjects. It does feel the combination of them looking down and the shooting position being slightly above the subjects, it's kind of diminishing them in the frame. I think it would have been a lot stronger had you been a little bit further down, or if they've been looking straight at you with the camera. Obviously, you get what you can get with the subjects. But yeah, it's something to consider, you know, when you're looking at subjects, especially, you know, cooperative subjects like these. Make sure that you know, take every opportunity you can to make the best shot that you can. But I love the cuteness factor on this image. I love the sharpness. I love the setting that they're in. Beautiful, beautiful setting. Next,
They're really cute.
they're very cute.
Okay, this one is called Think Pink.
And this is really interesting. It's obviously a flamingo, and we're looking at the rear end of the flamingo. When the flamingos sleep, they actually bury their beak in between their wings, facing backwards. So that's one of the reasons I know we're looking at the rear end of the flamingo. And you focused on the eyes, which is great, and we can get a tiny peek of the right eye here behind that feather. But we have such a large piece of the bird that's front and center, that's out of focus, that is drawing my eye away from looking at the eye and looking at my subject itself. So perhaps this would have been better shooting at a smaller aperture, so have a deeper depth of field, and focusing on the feathers in the foreground. So you do have that larger part of the image, the kind of what naturally seems to be the focal point. You want that to be in focus, and in this case, it's not. Our eyes are in focus, but in this case, I would like to have the eye and the back in focus, because that's sort of in front of the eye, pointing towards the viewer. Next one, please.
Okay, this one is called Bugling King.
I love this image. I think this is great. I love I love everything about this image. It's such a great environmental shot. We have, the big bull elk here, tending its harem. So bull elk, and this is clearly fall, which is when the elk rut takes place. And bull elk during the elk rut are busy 24/7 defending the harem, keeping all its females in its close proximity, preventing other males from taking any one of its females. So they get exhausted. Elk have been known to die out of exhaustion protecting their females from other bull elk. And I love the fact that we have the bull elk in the foreground that appears to be bugling with a bunch of elk cows in the background, and even an elk calf, which is really, really cool. I love all the different elk that are there in different positions throughout the scene. Perhaps I may cut, or I would crop a little bit on the left-hand side, so that your elk is not so much dead center in there. But I'd have to do it to see if that would actually improve the image. But I love, the light as it's falling on the subject. I love the action. I love the setting. And I love the different shadows on the grasses in different parts of the scene. Yet, all of our elk have some light on them. So they all stand out. Very nicely done. And this one gets a merit.
Awesome. So that is a merit for Lori Keller. I love how the motion in this image goes too. Like he's going this way and then they're going that way. So your eye goes all the way around.
Right. It circles from, counterclockwise, which is, perfect.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so this one is called McCullough Peaks Wild Horse.
So this is interesting. I like the setting and I like the subject, but there's a couple of things that I would work on improving. So you see on the lower right-hand corner, we have this big black, blob of vegetation that's really, really dark, and it's overwhelming and overpowering. That's in contrast with the bright on the left. The bright on the left is beautiful. We have some detail on the grasses there, but this really dark space on the lower right-hand side, I think, distract us a little too much. Also, see how our subject is looking down, kind of makes them look a little bit down on their luck, if you will. So try to get an image where you are, where the subject is looking up. So it looks healthier, it looks more active. It looks like it's about to do something. A couple of things that I do like about the image, I love the texture. You got the focus straight on. I love the separation between all the different legs on the horse, which makes it very attractive. I love the texture on the hair on the horse as well. And I love the setting. I think the background, the mountains in the background are a really nice setting, and very, very compelling and attractive. But unfortunately, that lower right-hand corner that's really, really dark just detracts too much from what could be a better image. That, and make sure that always, maybe perhaps you were able to photograph this horse, a sequence of images. So look for one where the head is more held high than down low. Next one, please.
And this one is called Stalking.
This looks like a hungry coyote looking for some food. So, remember what we talked about, not looking down at our subjects. Here, we're looking down at the subject. It would have been much better to be at, kind of eye level to your subject. Sometimes we take what we can get. So this may have been the only opportunity that you have. But see what's happening here, because we're looking down at our subject, we have more chances of collisions between all the different legs on our subject. We have the legs, the right left leg being obscured by our coyote snout, and then we have the rear left leg being obscured by the right rear leg, and that's what happens when you're looking at your subject. If you were looking more eye level to them, you'd be able to have better chance of getting separation between us. Okay, next.
Okay, this one is called Rim Dancing.
Oh, I love this image. I think that the light on our subject, the way the light is being just peeking over that little ridge and hitting our ewe, and then that background that's really nice and out of focus, yet it gives you a hint of what it is that we're looking at. I think works very nicely. I do see, though, a halo around the subject. So perhaps you may have overdone it a little bit on bringing out the light on that front subject, because it's also really bright. And I see a halo around the horns and around the back. So maybe dial down a little bit on the processing that you did on the goat itself, or on the sheep itself, sorry, to brighten it. I think it's over bright, and you're introducing the halo by bringing out that brightness a little bit more. And oftentimes I see this for people who don't have calibrated monitors, and they're trying to make everything much brighter because their monitor is really dark. So make sure that if you want to create images that look great on anybody's monitor or most people's monitors, make sure that you calibrate your monitor as well. Really nice image. I like it. Next one, please.
Okay, this one is called Blackbird Fly.
That's a beautiful, beautiful seal. Or sea lion. I forget the distinction. I think it's a sea lion. I like the position. I love the action, the bubbles flying. The only problem that I have is that there does seem to be, a bit of motion blur on the eye right around the face, which is usually, the more difficult part to have motion blur on. Having motion blur on the body is not as problematic, but you want to be able to see that eye nice and sharp. One suggestion that I would have is look at, I'm not a person big on plugins, but there are two plugins that I do use, and that is Topaz Denoise for reducing noise in high ISO images, and Topaz Sharpen. And not so much for sharpening, but in situations like this, where my shutter speed just wasn't exactly where it needed to be, and I have a tiny bit of motion blur. You'd be amazed what it may be able to do to sharpen that face and that eye and reduce that motion blur that's there. I think it's worthwhile doing because, I think otherwise it's an outstanding image. I love the shape and the motion, and the light that's coming in from above is absolutely stunning.
I actually I actually uploaded a different image today when I realized I uploaded the wrong images yesterday. So it was done with Topaz, and this is not the upload with Topaz. And I also did not have my name on the proper one. I just uploaded the wrong images yesterday in a moment of stupidity. But yeah, I'm a Topaz user.
Yeah.
Away.
Okay,
Richard,
next one.
maybe you can post the other ones. I'm gonna change the theme on the Facebook group to wildlife. So maybe you want to post the other one in the Facebook group.
You got it. I'll do it later.
Awesome. Okay, this one is called Chandelier.
Yeah, it's interesting. This sort of this jellyfish looking, upside down. And I'm mesmerized by these. I was mesmerized. If you've ever been to the Monterey Aquarium, they have these incredible displays of jellyfish against blue that are absolutely mesmerizing. But I guess I have a few problems with this image. It does look like, the shutter speed is not up there, so we don't have a lot of sharpness in this scene. I do like the unusual angle of showing it upside down because it does look like, like the name implies, a chandelier. But we also don't have a lot of contrast in the image. So we're losing a lot of detail, which I like to see. I'm like looking at this image and trying to extract detail out of it, whether it's, in the upper part of the image where you have all that incredible lace looking parts of the jellyfish. I just want to see more detail in the image that I'm not seeing. And it could be a combination of a slow shutter speed as well as very high ISO in order to make the image. Maybe been it looks like it was a pretty dark environment. So I would work on seeing if you can either extract more detail out of it or some light into it, and reduce some of the noise that's there as well. Next one, please.
This one is called Bonded.
It's a beautiful, beautiful image. I love the interaction. I love the tenderness between our subjects. I like the tight crop, but again, I think I do a tiny bit less tight. I don't like the way that the ear on the adult on the female is cut off. I would either crop it more or crop it less. I think I'd want to crop it less. Want to be able to see that top of the ear as much as possible. And I also would like to see the image with more contrast. I used to shoot black and white long time ago before I shot color. And when we shot black and white, we would term or we had a term to describe the contrast in image. We call it how dense an image was. And I think this image requires a little bit more density. It's really light in color, and these gorillas are definitely much darker in tone. So I like to see a little bit darker version of this. I think it's a beautiful image. I think it definitely deserves a merit, for sure. But I'd love to see it with a little bit denser, a little bit more contrast, a little bit deeper darks, deeper blacks to it.
I actually didn't crop it much. But what you're looking at, and I keep doing this, that's the one that went out to print. So I lightened it up knowing it was going to be darker in print. But yeah, it needs more contrast.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Really beautiful moment though. So that's a merit for Jane Silberman. Okay, and this one is called Sibling Rivalry.
Love the detail on these. This is beautiful. I'm just looking at the texture and the color and the fact that I can see these teeth on each individual one is just amazing. I do feel that it's a little tight. I'd like to see a little bit more open, especially when we have that very colorful coral or rock in the background, I think including some of that, and not cutting all those whiskers on the top right-hand side and even on the bottom left-hand side would have improved the image a little bit. I'd like to see a little bit more breathing room. But other than that, I'm just mesmerized by the detail and the interaction between these two. Absolutely stunning and beautiful. This one deserves a merit.
And that is a merit for Richard Horn. I think their teeth are kind of like, they look like gold teeth, like
I've
a
never-
rapper would.
Those are babies. How come, 6-month-old sea lions have rotted teeth? I don't get it.
Yeah.
I've never understood that. By the way, this is one of those shots, Angel, like I did with the butterfly fish, where I spent the entire day diving the same spot to get to know them, for them to be comfortable enough for me to be 6 feet away while they were playing 60 feet down to get the picture. So this is an all-day adventure for one shot.
Really cool. I love it. Okay, and this one is called Elephant Black and White.
Still waiting for it to show up. Okay.
Light again.
So one of the things I really like about this image, thinking about the composition, see how we have a little bit of room at the bottom, even though we can't see the feet, we can see where the feet should be because we have that little bit of room at the bottom. Oftentimes people tend to crop we can't see where the bottom of the feet are, or where they would naturally in our mind where they should be. So the fact that you did that here, I think works very nicely. I think I would have liked to see a little more separation on the feet, though. They're the legs, they're kind of all bunched up. It looked like it was one big stump with 3 legs kind of together, and then one all by itself, and then the trunk is also merging with that. So being able to separate all those individual elements can give us a better sense and feeling for our subject. I think this image, like the one that we saw earlier, could use a little bit more, darker or more density, a little darker, just richer blacks than what you have here. To be able to see some of that detail a little bit more if you have a little bit darker blacks and richer blacks, and especially on the elephant itself. I do see the rich blacks on the trees in the background, but the elephant itself, especially particularly around the trunk and around the legs, they seem to be more grayish than darkish. And in the black and white world, you want to have that contrast, that black and white, at least in my book. Yeah, a beautiful shot. I love the expression. I love the texture. And I love the grasses and the setting as well. But I think that the collision between 3 of the legs and the trunk kind of detract away from me being able to appreciate this animal, appreciate this creature. Next one, please.
Okay, so then this is our open category.
Okay.
So it's just other subjects besides wildlife. And this one is, I just pulled up the chat. This one is called Stormy Picnic.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think I get what they were trying to get at, but I think that there's a couple of issues here that that I think may have been a little bit better executed. So, for example, we have very little room at the bottom of the frame where the benches are sitting. We don't see that deck as much. I like to see a little bit more of that. We also have, a couple of collisions here between the horizon line and the globe orb that's in the center. I want to have a little bit more separation there, being able to have that globe kind of stand on its own, not being bisected by the horizon. Same thing with the sculpture on the right, the glass sculpture on the right. There's a collision both with the horizon as well as that bench on the right-hand side. So those are things I would be paying attention to make sure that you don't have those collision things that intersect one another, may detract from one another. Having said that, I'm a wildlife photographer, so when I look at some of these images, I'm a little bit out of my element, so I can apply some of the things that I look for on the things that I photograph mostly. But I can appreciate the simplicity of the scene. I like the way the rocks interplay with the softer materials in the scene, like the benches and the wood of the benches, as well as the deck. I do wonder if, how the image would have also appeared if you were more symmetrical, because there's a lot of symmetry taking place here. If you're more symmetrical and looking at this bench straight on, as opposed to a slight angle like you have right now. We have one bench that is more angle than the other, and we have the table kind of askew. If you shot straight at the table and had the two benches very symmetrical, I think it would have created a different image that would seem, much more symmetrical, which is kind of like what I would expect from an image that's this graphic quality. Next one, please.
This one is called Happy Halloween.
I think that there's a lot going on in this image. I think that, again, I'm always looking at simplification. How do I simplify the image to bring in my viewer and control, the story behind the scene, if you will. And the leg on the left-hand side with other tattoos kind of detracts from my subject, which is clearly, this dog with a wig and the little flowers on his head. I think the subject is awesome, is really interesting and attractive, but I am being constantly pulled away towards that leg on the left, distracting me from my subject. So I would try to see if you can, either by cropping or maybe another image where you focus more on the dog itself, if you didn't have all these other elements in the scene that are distracting from what your main subject needs to be or should be. But I love the expression of this dog. I love the wig that it's wearing. It's just it's pretty cool.
I
Next
sat
one,
in
please.
dog poop to get that.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Hey, we suffer for what we do.
Okay. You guys aren't seeing a gray band across the top of the screen, are you?
No.
Nope.
Okay. All right, because I see my Zoom controls. So I didn't want it to go over the images.
By the way,
So this
Angel,
one is called,
Angel,
yes.
Did you notice Myrna's comment in the chat?
I did not. No, I
You
didn't see the
missed an-
chat.
You missed an image called Menage a Trois, the otters. It was in the Dropbox.
I just checked the Dropbox and I don't see it. I'm sorry you were missed,
Okay, never
Myrna.
mind.
Yeah, it's not, I guess it's not in the Dropbox. I could probably pull it up off of my email when we're done. It'll take me just a second. Yeah, there's another animal one. Okay, so this one is called Palos Verdes Night Scene.
Yeah, this is neat. There's a couple of things here right off the bat that I want to comment on. There's a couple of things that you can do to improve this image really easily. So, for example, if you look at the horizon, it's not perfectly straight. When you have a horizon in the scene, you want to make sure that that is straight. Even if you didn't take it straight when you were out there. I mean, I do this all the time. I don't know why, but a lot of my horizons are not straight, no matter what I do. You want to make sure that you do straighten that in post-processing. Then if we look at the bottom here, we're so close to that vegetation. I would have given yourself a little bit more room down there, especially now if you try to straighten this, you're going to lose even more of that bottom part of the frame. And I think that bottom part of the frame would have been a good anchoring point for the image. itself. This looks like a long exposure of some kind. I'm not sure what that light is on the background. I'm assuming maybe that this is some lava in Hawaii, but then again, I'm not so sure because it's a long exposure. But I like the composition, but I think that having that, you want to have that horizon straight. You want to give yourself a little bit of room at the bottom. Remember I said earlier, make sure you run your eyes along the edge. And obviously this was on a tripod. So you set this up and you had time while you were there because it's a kind of a longish exposure. So you had time to look at all the edges and make sure that all the edges were right. The other thing I would look at too is if you look at the left-hand side of that cove, it's so close to the edge. You want to give yourself a little bit more room there. You don't want to bring that point of the inside of that cove right to the edge of the frame. You're going to give yourself a little bit of room. Think about if you were to frame this, you've put a mat on it. Now you've lost that little bit of land on that corner there. So always give yourself a little bit of room. Don't, especially for landscapes. I tend to shoot a little bit wider than I think I need so that if I have to make some corrections afterwards, I do have a little bit of leeway.
If you don't mind, I have a quick question. I live here. I'm pretty sure that's the light from the lighthouse.
Hmm.
But I'm confused as to how it's just pointing downward and not outward, because there is a lighthouse literally 10 feet from the left edge of that image.
Yeah, my guess is that there is some humidity in the air, some fog or something that's what it's lighting up. That would be my guess. Okay, next one, please.
Okay, and this one is called Just a Wave.
Yeah, I like this. This is a great, beautiful image. I can see this printed on a big wall and put up, and you kind of keep looking at the patterns, and you see more patterns and more lines the more you look into it. I love the white line at the bottom that seems to make like a very, very gentle S curve at the bottom that kind of mimics the lines in the water above. So very cool. Looks like another long exposure as well. Very nicely done. I'm a sucker for, wide aspect ratios. So I love this image. This one deserves a merit.
Great image by Kathy Painter. Congratulations, Kathy.
Thanks, you guys.
Okay, and this one is called Star Worship.
Yeah, I love these Milky Way shots. One of the challenges that I have with a lot of these Milky Way shots is that, people are bringing out the sky in such a way that colors don't look natural to me. I've done a lot of astrophotography, and when people try to bring out so much light into that sky, it gets this sort of really, really bright blue, which you don't really see at night, even with your naked eye or whatnot. I understand it's an interpretation of what you're doing there, but for me, when we're shooting, nature, we want it to be at least, close to resembling what you see with your naked eye. When we bring in so much light into this and we get this sort of bright blue skies at night, it just doesn't, it looks to me more like a artistic painting than a photograph, if you will. I mean, not that again, my feedback is all subjective, right? The only person in most cases that you need to please is yourself. So if you're happy with a picture, that's fine, that's great. But for me, being able to have a more realistic view of what the night sky really looks like, yes, we enhance it with a long exposure. We bring out the Milky Way so we can see it a little better. But when we take it a little bit too far, it just becomes, more of a, painting almost in my book than a photograph. So I would encourage you to dial it back a little bit and give me a more realistic shot that we would normally see. And I'm not sure whether also when we look at, not sure about the screen, if there's an issue with screen profiles or screen calibration or whatnot. But even, I mean, this center here, the core of this Milky Way, it's blown out. It's like too bright, too white. So that, which tells me really it's either exposed or over processed. I would try to dial that back a little bit. Next one, please.
I just wanted to add something. If you guys are interested, on YouTube, Scott Kelby has a show called The Grid, and it's like a talk show, and they do image reviews. There is an episode with Serge Ramelli, and they were talking about how Serge has his photos in a lot of galleries and coffee table books. So he was saying how the gallery owner and the coffee table, the people who publish the coffee table books, were talking to him about over processing. And they were saying that, like, Scott and Serge were having this conversation where if you over process the image or you bump up the colors a lot and you show it to a photographer, the photographer is going to say, those colors are unrealistic and they're bumped up or they're over processed. But the gallery owners and the coffee table book publishers were saying, yes, please give us the images like that, because when the public sees that image, they're like, oh, wow. And it's sort of a fantasy thing. They can't capture that with their cameras. And that gets the attention, especially when people are walking by on the street and they see it in the gallery window. So they liked that. But so they said it really depends on who you're showing it to.
Right.
And so like there's a back and forth conversation I found kind of interesting if you guys want to check it out.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You will find most photographers like to have a more realistic shot, whereas most of the general public likes to have the hyper realistic stuff.
Yeah, if this was super realistic, people might scroll by on Instagram, but if it pops like that, then it'll get on the boards and get shared and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting, the difference between people's tastes, who you're showing it to. Okay, so this one is called Fireworks.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Beautiful, beautiful image. I love the color. I love the patterns. Yeah, it's just, there's so much detail here, so much to look at. The little buds as they're coming out in different stages of flowering. And I love the hint of the background. We can see some of the leaves are a little bit out of focus, but we can still see some of the detail on them and whatnot. So I think it's really well done. Very compelling, very attractive. I love the fact that you use a diagonal in here as well to place these flowers on, which makes it much more dynamic and allows you eye to view, look at the image up and down. Yeah, this one deserves a merit. Nicely done. Beautiful light on it as well.
And that is a merit for Shirley Day. And then I think we just have one in the altered states category. This one is called What Is He Seeing?
This is an interesting image. It's, really, really out of my element. And there's a lot to see here. It looks almost like a double exposure, something I've done in the past. I love the lighthouse, especially with these modern lighthouses, which are not anywhere near as attractive as our old lighthouses, but they're a lot easier to maintain for the Coast Guard. I love the scene, but the overexposure or the second exposure that's on top, which is I think what's going on here. There's a second exposure that was that's on top of the base exposure. It's a little too distracting for me. So I'm confused by what I'm looking at. I'm confused by, what's in front, what's in the back. And that may be the intent of the creator. But to me, it's a little bit confusing. So it's hard for me to focus on any one thing because my eye gets getting distracted by, by, for example, if I'm looking at the eagle, then I see the clouds that are kind of streaking that seem to be the second exposure. Then my eye goes down to the island at the bottom, but it's also kind of in a haze from that second exposure. So I commend you on the creativity, but to me, it's too confusing of an image. When I've seen double exposures, which I think that's what this is, to me, they seem to be more complementary to one another. Whereas here, they seem to be competing with one another. I hope that I'm conveying that correctly. So yeah, so to me, there isn't something that's compelling me, to look at this image and analyze it and find out what's going on, because it's confusing as to, what's what within the image. The two images don't seem to complement each other. They're kind of more competing with each other. Okay, was that the last one?
I think that is the last one. I'm going to try to quickly see if I can retrieve the other one that was not uploaded to the Dropbox. But I don't want to hold everybody up for that. Maybe I will be able to shoot it to you on an email if I can't get it. We have a new system. And so we're just trying to get everybody used to uploading to the Dropbox, and it's going mostly well, but a couple of times, a few people had a little bit of a hard time getting their stuff in the Dropbox. Do you guys have any questions for Juan? Whoops, am I still screen sharing?
No, you're good.
All right, you guys can ask questions. I will be 1 second. If I can't get this quickly, then we'll go ahead and end the meeting.
I haven't seen your
I had
husband
one.
pop into your shoulder once tonight. Did you send
What's
him?
that?
I haven't seen your husband pop into your shoulder once tonight.
No, he was kind of floating around in the background, although I kept telling my son during the presentation, I'm like, come over here and look at this animal, look at this image, it's so cool. So I saw him pop in a couple of times.
Did someone have a question? I think we heard someone's trying to talk.
Oh, that was my dog. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Just wanted to make sure no one got cut off on
Does the
accident.
dog have a question?
Yeah.
Rufus, do you have a question?
So,
I had
Juan,
a quick question. I had
Juan,
a quick question for
go ahead.
Rod.
Go ahead, Angel. You
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry. I can't see you guys because I'm on a different
Ah.
screen. So forgive me if I was interrupting.
Juan, you have gone away from quote unquote primes to zooms. Okay. And trust me, many of us are there with you. So at the same time I say that, I am anxiously awaiting my 2.8 400 millimeter TC. Now I know that's not a zoom, but it is still a 2.8 400 and a 560, what, 5.6?
Yep.
So I'm thinking that's going to be my ultimate wildlife lens at some point. But now, are you finding that that's just too long most of the time, or?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think that, still you're going to be shooting at, what, 400 and what's a 1.4 TC, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a 560 at
Yeah, 560 and 400, which, to me, I find it, haven't been using zooms, especially super telephoto zooms. I find that I can go anywhere between 200 and 600. I would find just being limited to 400 and 560 very, very limiting.
So,
You know what I'm
but do
saying?
you find your f-stop to be acceptable? Because I can toss a 1.4 on the back of that lens and have it be a 7 whatever at f6. What are your f6.5, I think. So that's my question is, do you find the longer ranges to be what you're using, or am I going to be limited not having shorter than 200 or 400 without having to put my 7200 on there.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're shooting. So for example, when I'm shooting large mammals, I definitely will use the short end of that range. You know, whether it's, you know, an elk or it's a bison or it's an elephant or, you know what I'm saying, or a hippo, I'm on that short end of that range. So 400 would be way too long for those situations.
So
So
how
I'd
do you,
have to have a second body, with second camera with a shorter lens or whatnot. And I'm, you know, my right arm is screwed up from carrying my 500 f4 for over a decade. So there is something to be said for having lighter, you know, smaller equipment out in the field.
okay, I just
You know, I
wanted
find
to,
that having a lighter equipment that I can handhold, yeah, allows me to get more images because I'm not having, you know, I can be much more, like I like to say, light, quick, and nimble compared to having a big monster heavy lens. You know, although granted 500, you know, modern prime 500s and 600 are
always less than,
way
yeah,
less than the older ones,
Yeah.
but they're still big, bulky, and heavy.
so, but how, do you find it really limiting to use two bodies for that purpose?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Because you have two bodies over you, you're like moving another one, shaking another one. You got to make sure one is secure before you pull the other one out to shoot. You know what I'm saying? Whereas I just have one on my person, I usually just have one camera, one body, you know, on the strap. I'll have in the vehicle, you know, another camera body with a shorter lens, like a 24-105 that I'll use on occasion. But that 200 to 600, you know, can satisfy 85, 90% of the wildlife shooting that I'm doing with just one lens.
And you
Much
don't
more
find,
lightweight.
you don't find the higher f-stop to be limiting?
Well, the f-stop is what, 5.6 on the short end and 6.3 on the long end.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's variable. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's, you know, 6.3 is still, you know, incredible. Now you pair that with the incredibly high ISO performance of modern cameras.
Oh, no, I know. I'm a Z9, so I'm good
Yeah.
for ISO 2500 anytime I want it.
Exactly, is no big deal. You know, and I'm shooting, you know, when I'm shooting a 600, which I'm at 6.3, I'm shooting at a distance from the subjects. And typically the backgrounds are even further than that. So the bokeh and the autofocus backgrounds is not an issue. In most cases, certain situations, I wish, you know, it was a little shallower. But oftentimes when I'm shooting big animals, I do want that depth of field because I can see more of the bison, for example.
So in other words, you'd like my lens in Costa Rica, but not in Yellowstone.
Right. Yes.
Which lens is it?
Yeah, oh God, you don't need, oh, well, how much did your
It's
motor?
not even out yet, but yes.
Yeah, I ordered it a year ago. It's the 400 millimeter Z 2.8, and it's called a TC. In other words, it has a built-in 1.4 teleconverter.
Oh, that's got the, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just $15,000 lens, but it's stupid. I mean, and then on top of that, it's so sharp and so well designed. When you flip the teleconverter to 560, it's still a 4.5 lens. And now you can put a 1.5 teleconverter, 1.4 teleconverter on the back of the lens itself. And now you have a 6 to 7, 6, what is it? 6.
That would be a
It's
6.3.
almost 700, yeah. With at f6
Yeah.
or something. So it's stupid.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing, but you got to sell your car or your first child. But then the kids aren't worth anything once they turn, 12. So you got to sell them early.
Okay,
Well,
now,
and if you sell them early, then you don't have to pay for college.
There you go. See, you get an extra camera.
you guys are making friends here. All right, I found that image. I'm gonna go ahead and screen share this so we can get Juan's feedback. And where did it go? Okay, so this one is called Menage a Trois.
Oh, you found it. Yay.
I found it. Sorry, it's loaded super slow because I'm running the Zoom.
By the way, Juan, great presentation. And I've been doing this for a living for a really long time. And your 20 spots are spot on.
Thank you.
Oh, it's not showing?
Oh, we
No,
got your email. We're looking at your email. Now, oh, wait, isn't that your other boyfriend? You shouldn't be doing this with your husband around.
Is that, is it
Sorry, I had
showing?
to do that. All we're still seeing is your email page. We got Myrna there, lost my Zoom link.
I don't know why it's not showing this. I don't know.
Is it a really awesome picture?
It's really great. It's really great. And Myrna submitted it, so I definitely wanted to show it, but it didn't make it into the Dropbox, so I'm having a hard time getting it to you guys here on the meeting. Are you guys seeing it now?
What if we,
Nope.
no, we're not seeing anything. What if we decide to give her a merit just for fun because we couldn't see?
Yeah, maybe I will just email this to Juan and he could email me a couple of comments about it for Myrna. So I'm sorry that it didn't get into the box this time. Let me get back to the Zoom so I can see you guys. So anyway, it is getting late for Juan and all of you East Coast people. I
yeah, how
appreciate
many
you
of us
so
are
much.
East Coast?
Who's East
How many-
Coast?
How many of us are East Coast?
I am Roman.
And me too. Is this or what would have been an earlier time okay for everybody?
I'm okay with it. I mean, for me, it's what now? It's 8:30 at night. We could do this till 9. I'm happy.
Oh,
Yeah,
take
I'm
a
good with it.
hike.
I'm good with
I
it.
tend to
but that's
I tend to
midnight.
stay up late anyway, so it doesn't bother me.
I saw a lot of nice comments in the chat that the earlier time was working, so maybe we'll keep this one at 6 o'clock next time. But we are going to jump off for tonight. And I just wanted to thank Juan again for the amazing presentation. I urge
Yeah.
you guys to connect with him and follow him on socials, get on his email list so you can stay apprised of his workshops and maybe even connect with him out in the field. So you
That'd
guys
be
can,
awesome.
Are you going to be sending
continue
us
to
a
learn
link
from
to
him.
get to Juan?
Yes, I will put that in the email. I'll send out the recording tomorrow and you guys will get all of his relevant links in that email.
I'd have to have a contract that says I wouldn't be out in the dark at night.
Sounds like he's pretty conscientious, taking care of everybody.
Jane, just
What?
remember, there's no such thing as a Milky Way shot unless you're out at night.
Yeah, but that's open space and I can jump in a car. You know, that doesn't work. And where I'm gonna be, it's gonna be freezing cold. So I'm not worried about that one.
I need a contract that says, under no circumstances will you make me look at a snake.
Maybe the Antarctic workshop is best for you, Angela.
I think so.
There you
I
go.
think it's the safest.
Hey, Juan, I don't know if you remember me, but I did a Highlands workshop in Iceland with you in September of
Yes.
2017.
Yes, how you doing, Roman?
Pretty good.
Yeah, no, I remember you, absolutely.
I like Iceland so much. I've been back there so many times that I've now spent something like over 100 days there shooting over
Oh, that's
since,
awesome.
yeah,
That's excellent.
Where was this?
Iceland.
Ah,
Oh,
Yeah, and I stopped running workshops in Iceland like, I don't know, like 7 years ago or something like that. So that was a while ago.
Juan, why did you start? Why did you stop?
Well, because Iceland is, it's getting crazy. So many people going and, I'm trying to do less, travel less. So I'm doing more of what I really want to do which is wildlife and less
Mhm.
landscape.
The reason that was the reason I asked is because I haven't done it yet, and I really have Iceland on my list.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of feedback that makes me wonder if it's just gotten too crazy and too crowded.
Well, right now it's still good. Right now it's good because of the pandemic. Things haven't picked up since the pandemic.
Yep.
That much. But just before the pandemic, it was just too crazy for me.
what are your
Like I
thoughts?
said, for me, the experience is as important as the photos and the
Mhm.
experience going to
Yeah.
shooting a location with a bus that just offloads after you have set up your gear, and then you have 100 people coming off a bus ruining your shot. This just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
Oh, one
Is
other.
Africa doing the same thing? Is the same thing happening in Africa now?
In Africa is different. In Africa, depending on where you go, you may, you may be in a reserve and you'll see a cheetah, and all of a sudden out of the woodwork, 40 Jeeps come out of, I don't know where.
Yeah.
And then they surround the cheetah with 40 Jeeps. And you're like, what, what is this?
Yeah.
So when I do, for my Africa workshops, we go to private reserves where there's only a few vehicles in. So you at most run into one or two other vehicles. You don't run into those situations where you have 30 vehicles surrounding a cheetah that,
Yeah.
that you can't
get
really
it.
shoot without getting something in a vehicle in the background.
Juan, that was one of my questions for you, actually, is your shot of the hippo. Somebody, your assistant actually responded that it was a long line 600 millimeter. Personally, I found that all my hippo shots came from a canoe. Did you do that, or
Canoe.
trips small enough to be in a canoe with a
I know
guide?
it's a little crazy, but no, the hippos, we shoot those from the water. We're on a boat.
Yeah, right, okay.
In
How big a
Botswana.
boat?
Yeah, but it's a, it's a motor boat, so we can get away quickly if we need to.
Okay. My trip,
I wouldn't do it on a canoe with a hippo.
Yeah,
But
no,
on a motorboat, I do it.
Okay, we were literally on a canoe with a guide and 4 people.
Yeah.
And I was, that's the only reason I only got one really good shot with the mouth open like yours, is you're suddenly going, holy shit, are we gonna die?
Right.
That was a beautiful shot.
The way I do those is we are on a custom-made boat for photography that has seats with built-in gimbals for your big lenses, and it has padding so you can actually get down low and just be 6 inches above the water to shoot as well.
And how much
Okay.
does the boat weigh?
Custom photography boat idea. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's amazing. It's really, really cool.
Can you retrofit your kayaks for us?
And how much does the boat weigh?
I don't know, but I would say probably 2,000 pounds, maybe.
Could a hippo knock it over?
Of course.
Probably not. With
Well,
people on
of
it, we
course-
weigh
Of course
more.
it
So
could, but you
they
run
would probably
away.
just push it, but it doesn't matter. We have a
Swim away.
motor. We can get out of the way very quickly.
So Juan, do you still do Africa trips of that nature, or?
Oh yeah.
Of course, if I decide to do another safari a year from now or 2 years from now, are you still doing that? Because that's the kind of.
Yeah, go to my website. There you can sign up for. I have 2 going on this year and 2 next year.
Okay,
And there's
'cause
more
I-
next year. We have one, we're working on one for Madagascar as well. That will happen next year.
That would be cool.
But yeah, we have 2 this year that are sold out except for one spot. There's one spot available in one. And then next year still open.
Yeah, well, this year I'm out of the game this year. I'm probably a year to 2 years out, just in
Yeah.
general from health reasons, but
Oh yeah, no, we said
I
definitely, we
want-
definitely do those.
yeah, I really want to do another safari, but I've heard too much about the recent safaris being what you're talking about, where
Yes.
27 Jeeps show up. In my day, there was nobody around. There were 8 of us on the trip. We had, all of that. It was very small and intimate.
Right.
And
that's-
I
that's-
like that.
I mean, that's how I run all my workshops. They're all, usually a maximum of 8 people and 2 instructors. And they're very small and more intimate.
I'd like to go stay in the giraffe hotel.
I don't know where that is.
No
It's
idea.
in Africa
Yeah.
But
Oh,
that,
yeah,
that
but
was
And
the
it's
staying in
galaxy.
the
only
United
like-
States.
and it's only
Africa
like
is huge.
$2,000 a night.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, we'll all go then.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
all go. Wait, hold it. Who's the guy that won the 2.2 billion a few weeks back? We need him.
Right.
And
All right,
Well,
you guys,
maybe
I'm gonna,
we can write a grant.
By the way, Angel,
yes,
this little 15, 20-minute thing is really the best part of the night, being able to actually chat with Juan about, you know what I mean, about real life instead of just a presentation and here's the pictures. This is cool.
Mhm.
You should think about that in the
I
future.
agree. I love this. I just don't want to keep Juan up too late because I know it was already a late start
It's
time for
almost
him.
midnight
So I
here.
just want to be, I want to be conscious of him.
We lost his assistant a half an hour ago. She told
Yeah,
us
she left.
she went to bed.
Yeah. I guess I don't pay her enough.
Well,
All
I'm
right,
going
you
back
guys.
to
Well, I
work
did
now.
enjoy this time with you, and Juan, I thank you so much for staying late with us and for all
Yeah,
of your
thank-
really thoughtful reviews. This was amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you. Thank you
Hey.
for having me.
Hey, Juan, one more thing. I
Yep.
think that that last picture you had in your presentation with the like bunch of people lined up at the beach at Vesterhorn. I think
Yeah.
I'm in it because it's otherwise it's somebody else who has a half yellow and half burgundy windbreaker jacket.
That would be funny if that was you.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, you're right. There is one that's half yellow, half burgundy. Yeah,
That's
I'm
me.
looking at it now. That's funny. That's awesome.
You
So
made the slideshow.
And I
Angel,
have
we're
one,
getting, Angel,
have
we're
one
getting
last-
together next month.
I'm sorry, what?
We're getting together in March sometime, right?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
in
Okay.
2 weeks.
No, I'm talking about the other thing.
The other
Oh.
thing, Jane mentors with me.
Ah, got it.
Yeah. So yes, we are getting together in March, and yes, the photo club is getting together in March. We'll have 2 presentations. Those will be to be announced very soon.
And one last question for Dan. I know he's muted, but I think he might still be there. Okay, I see the dome and the 10 and then the fisheye lens, but what the hell's the camera behind it?
Oh, that's actually a really simple Canon 80D.
Okay, all my stuff was a D2X.
Yeah, I've actually changed mine now to the Canon R5.
Okay, where do you dive?
That was in Guadalupe, but
Cool.
actually I just got back from the Antarctic.
Oh God, those are amazing. Iceberg.
And I met Dan in Yellowstone just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right, we did.
Ran into each other.
Yeah, and we're going on the trip to Alaska with you.
Yeah, and they're going to Alaska with me.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it tonight. Thank you all.
Well, thank you.
Thanks
Dan.
for
Nice to
being
see you
here.
again.
Thanks for.
Okay,
thanks,
folks.
Juan.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. I'm gonna go to bed.
Good night,
I'm
Juan.
going to work.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you,
Bye.
guys. Bye.
Thanks, Angel. Talk soon.
Sounds good. Bye.